Chapter 654. Pale lightning lit up the night sky. Summer solstice's cold and extremely calm voice spread throughout Mount Dibbing. The rainstorm became more and more chaotic. In the wind and rain, summer solstice was no longer the carefree little woman who raised flowers and grass. At this moment she stood in front of Li Tianlan, exuding a kind of strong and cold demeanor. She was calm but extremely dignified. Li Tianlan looked at her for a long time. He could not see any emotion in her eyes. Only indifference. "You hate the Li family," he suddenly said in a very affirmative tone. Summer solstice's eyes narrowed and she did not speak. She did not hate the former Li family, but she did hate Li Guangtu, his ambition and arrogance. If nothing had happened, how wonderful would it be now? The Li family, which was still close to the Wang family of Beihai, would still have Li Tianlan, and the Wang family of Beihai would still have Wang Yuetong. This was a real match made in heaven. The Lin clan, the Wang family, and the Li family would also go in another different direction. Not like now. That's good. Li Tianlan chuckled. The flashing lightning in the sky shone on his face. His face was calm, but his smile suddenly became extremely evil. It was a real kind of unscrupulous arrogance. You all know. He looked at Summer Solstice and Lin Fengting, and his voice was as cold as the wind from hell. Everything is over. The so-called affection is over. You hate me, I hate you. This is the relationship between the Li family and Beihai today. He looked at Lin Fengting's increasingly bitter and helpless face and whispered, "The Lin clan and Beihai have affection. The Li family and the Lin clan have affection. But the Li family and the Wang family, I and the Wang family only have hatred." His voice rushed out of the mountain road and swept around like thunder. "My Li family and Beihai are just enemies. The most difficult thing in everything was purity. Purity was the best. The Li family was his Li family. Today what he stood here and said was the rule of the Li family in the future. Or the rule. The Li family and the Wang family were mortal enemies forever." Lin Fengting smiled bitterly and shook his head. They did not agree. Summer Solstice seemed to be too lazy to look at Li Tianlan again. She reached out to support Lin Fengting's body and said softly, "Let's go up the mountain." Lin Fengting looked at Li Tianlan deeply and said softly, "Leave a way out for everything. Tianlan, you know my bottom line. I also said something to Tianzong back then. Now it's yours." His voice was soft and firm. "If we cross that line, the Li family will be the mortal enemy of the Lin clan in the future. I won't rest until one of us dies." It was not a threat. Instead, it was the clearest stance. The Lin clan must protect the Li family and the Wang family. At all costs. That was the kind of person he was. The Lin clan was also such a family. In the face of the remaining Li family and Lin Fengting's bottom line, Wang Tianzong finally chose not to cross that line and gave up the plan to cooperate with Kunlun City to squeeze the Li family. Today Lin Fengting did not know what Li Tianlan would choose. Li Tianlan was expressionless. At this moment no one knew what he was thinking. Lin Fengting didn't say anything more. He turned around and walked along the mountain path to the top of the mountain. The howling wind and torrential rain were still raging all over the mountains and plains. Li Tianlan stood still and watched Summer Solstice and Lin Fengting's backs getting farther and farther away. He was as solemn as a statue. Mount Dibbing became quieter and quieter. Darkness and wind and rain shrouded the stage of Formidable Person. On the stage of Formidable Person, most of the core figures of the Wang family of Beihai stood there quietly, staring at the enemy at the foot of the mountain in the distance. The night was too dark, the rain was too heavy, and the distance was too far. Almost no one could see Li Tianlan's figure. But the strong humiliation slowly pressed down like the dark night in the sky. The glorious Mount Dibbing seemed to have become dim from the first day that the young man stepped into Beihai. Until tonight there was no more brilliance. Dijiang stood alone at the entrance of the stage of Formidable Person. The power as vigorous as the sea was slowly undulating in his body. The first disciple of the Sword Emperor with double thunder veins had risen to the extreme in both willpower and fighting desire. Seeing Summer Solstice and Lin Fengting walking over together, Dijiang was slightly stunned, but he didn't say anything. He just bowed deeply to Lin Fengting. Lin Fengting smiled and passed by Dijiang. He saw many familiar people, many of whom represented the present and future of the Wang family of Beihai. There were Wang Yuetong, Wang Qinglei, Song Xiai, and Tang Shi, the future hostess of the Wang family of Beihai, Lin Fengting watched all this quietly and kept silent for a long time. There are too many people, he whispered to himself. There were far more people on the stage of formidable person than what he saw. There were more people he knew but was not familiar with. Most of the core members of the Wang family of Beihai were standing here. Some were high officials in the political circle and some were patriarchs of the major branches of Beihai. There were so many of them that the number was close to 50. They stood there and almost filled the entire stage of formidable person. Don't worry. Summer Solstice said softly, these people are not standing here to fight with Li Tianlan. Lin Fengting looked at Dijiang and said nothing. Summer Solstice seemed to understand what he was thinking and said faintly, Hong Wei meant to send everyone including me to a safe place, but I didn't agree. Instead I gathered all the important people here. Tonight's battle, no matter who wins or loses, is the most important day for the Wang family of Beihai in recent decades. I won't let them fight with Li Tianlan. But as a member of the Wang family of Beihai, they have the obligation to remember today's humiliation. They must. He looked at Dijiang and said calmly, they must also remember the person who bore all the failures and curses for them today. Lin Fengting's mouth moved but he said nothing. He could see that Li Tianlan was very sober. Entering autumn water, breaking Tongtian, suppressing Kanglin, passing Floating Island, sweeping all the way to Xingzhou and Mount Dibing. It could be said that Li Tianlan's journey was stained with blood. But so far no important person who could really affect the overall situation of Beihai and the interests of Zhongzhou state had died under Li Tianlan's sword. Heaven Saber DK was a real heavyweight but his saber was still sealed. His death caused a huge loss to the Jiang family, but it had little impact on Beihai and no impact on Zhongzhou state. Huangfu Feiyu, the famous general of the Huangfu family, was seriously injured but it was not fatal. The Qin family suffered a great loss, but a large number of important people were also there. Li Tianlan's actions were accurate and almost insidious. He penetrated Beihai and weakened the most important elites of the major sword-holding families. He made them suffer a great loss, but he didn't touch the bottom line of Zhongzhou state. He didn't kill any important people, but he severely weakened the force of the major sword-holding families by several levels. It didn't matter whether his actions caused a great uproar or caused more undercurrents in Zhongzhou state. At least on the surface, Zhongzhou state still kept silent about Li Tianlan's current actions. So Lin Fengting didn't worry about the safety of these people. He came just to stop Li Tianlan from going to the stage of formidable person. No matter whether Dijiang bore the infamy or not, Li Tianlan standing on the stage of formidable person meant that he completely trampled on the Wang family of Beihai. In the absence of Wang Tianzong, the prestige of Mount Dibing would decline, and there would only be one ending. Division. Lin Fengting glanced at Wang Qinglei and sighed softly. Everything he did must ensure the integrity of the Wang family. How's his injury? Lin Fengting asked slowly in silence. His voice was so soft that only Summer Solstice could hear him. There was no doubt that he was asking about Wang Tianzong. Summer Solstice smiled bitterly. She had nothing to hide from Lin Fengting. The patriarch of the Lin clan in front of her was her childhood playmate. Not to mention how tangled his position was, such a person even as an enemy, was the kind of enemy that could be absolutely trusted. Not so good. She said slowly and then shook her head. Should be very bad. He has been in a deep coma, and now he has no self-consciousness at all. Lin Fengting subconsciously clenched his fists. Before the beginning of the day of eradication he knew about the 13-story building and the power of this sword. He wasn't surprised about Wang Tianzong's injury, but he didn't expect that it would be so serious. That was the Sword Emperor, a person who had created countless miracles. Lin Fengting looked at the knight at the foot of the mountain and was silent for a long time. Then he said softly, according to your estimation, how long will it take for Tianzong to recover? Summer Solstice's eyes were a little dazed. How long would it take for Wang Tianzong to recover? She didn't dare to think about it at all. Could even be said that she had never thought about it. In Wang Tianzong's current state, the injury would be the next step. Recovery was the next step. What she needed to consider now was how to keep Wang Tianzong alive. Things had indeed gotten to this point. Wang Tianzong was now wandering between life and death. Summer Solstice saw the process of the 13-story building's birth and understood some of its principles, but only a small part. These might bring some help to Wang Tianzong, but the premise was that Wang Tianzong had to get through the current crisis. and summer solstice could help him. And such help at most, the most optimistic result was that it could keep him from dying for the time being. The injury would be healed. Summer solstice was in a trance and murmured, "I don't know." Lin Fengting's heart sank slightly, and then he realized that the situation might be more serious than he thought. But when he thought of that sword, he didn't feel surprised. "I don't understand." Summer solstice's voice was very calm. "Third brother, do you know about the 13-story building?" Third brother. It was really a long-lost address. Lin Fengting felt a little emotional in his heart, but he didn't speak when he heard Summer Solstice's question. "That's the real sword of the Chosen One, the invincible sword. The problem is, in the Dark World for hundreds of years only Tianzong has reached this realm. Then why is there such a sword in Eastern Europe? Who is the legendary Dongqing Huangtu?" She looked at Lin Fengting and said quietly, "I know you know." "Who is he?" Lin Fengting smiled bitterly. "I know." He paused and whispered, "But I don't know how to say it." Summer Solstice looked at Lin Fengting for a long time. "I still don't understand," she said slowly. "Even if Dongqing Huangtu really exists and is really the Chosen One, how could his sword cause such serious damage to Tianzong? That night in Eastern Europe, Tianzong's swordsmanship was supreme. I don't believe anyone can surpass Tianzong at that time. Dongqing Huangtu stood at the same height as Tianzong at most. Even if the master of Samsara Palace can copy Dongqing Huangtu's sword, it shouldn't pose too much of a threat to Tianzong." That night, the Eternal Sword Light was indeed the most powerful sword move of the Chosen One at his peak. But Wang Tianzong was also the Chosen One, and there was no reason for him to be so seriously injured. In fact, not only did Summer Solstice underestimate Wang Tianzong's injury, but even Wang Tianzong underestimated his own injury, and it was a serious underestimation. "That sword move," Lin Fengting thought for a moment and whispered, "It's not what you think." It was a sword formation. Lin Fengting whispered, 13 half-step invincible realm experts who were telepathically connected assisted Flaming Fire, who was close to the peak of the invincible realm. Flaming Fire burst out with all her strength to condense sword intent and send it to the master of Samsara Palace at the peak of the invincible realm. In fact, all this was not for that sword move at all. 13 experts at the peak of the invincible realm Flaming Fire, and the master of Samsara Palace did not do everything to copy that sword move. The master of Samsara Palace condensed only sword intent at that time, and that sword intent was completely poured into Shen Yuanfeng. He smiled bitterly. It was Shen Yuanfeng who really made that sword move. Strictly speaking, that sword move is really the best in the world, because even Dongqing Huangtu can't make such a move, let alone the master of Samsara Palace. Shen Yuanfeng's sword move is more powerful than Dongqing Huangtu's own move. It's normal that Tianzong can't take it. But that's equivalent to 2 Tianzongs. Summer Solstice's voice was very stubborn. She had taken the immortality potion, but she still fell into this situation. It was easy to imagine what that meant. Lin Fengting stopped talking. He suddenly thought of the master of Samsara Palace, who was in a worse situation than Wang Tianzong. An emotion called fear continued to spread in his heart, turning into the deepest chill. He looked in the direction of Li Tianlan and kept silent for a long time. At this moment, Lin Fengting really felt fear. He was afraid that Li Tianlan would find out the truth. So everything that happened today was just a rehearsal. If the truth was exposed in front of Li Tianlan, what would happen? He looked back at the stage of Formidable Person behind him, at everyone on the stage of Formidable Person at Summer Solstice and at Dijiang. If Li Tianlan found out the truth one day, in the entire Mount Dipping, there might be no one alive in the 7 sword-holding families. That was the last thing Lin Fengting wanted to see. Maybe that was also the last thing Li Tianlan wanted to see. Chapter 655. Summer Solstice noticed Lin Fengting's strangeness at once. He tried to hide his expression in the dark wind and rain, but his eyes flickered with helplessness and bitterness that were close to despair. "What's wrong?" Summer Solstice asked aloud. Lin Fengting shook his head. He didn't know what to say or even what to do. Wang Tianzong could still wander between life and death. But the master of Samsara Palace had completely stepped into the gate of death. No one knew that the master of Samsara Palace was still in the Lin clan. Even few people in the Lin clan knew. Now the master of Samsara Palace had no vitality in her body. She was barely alive with the last breath. Lin Fengting couldn't describe the state that was infinitely close to quietus. The battle in Eastern Europe was too tragic. The master of Samsara Palace thought that everything was flawless. Li Tianlan's world was already clear, but the truth hidden in the dark was like a bottomless abyss, quietly devouring everything. Lin Fengting took a deep breath. Maybe that day would come when he really had to make a choice. But fortunately it was not today. So Wang Tianzong still had time. The master of Samsara Palace also had time. You didn't answer my question. Summer Solstice took a deep look at Lin Fengting and said quietly, the truth about that sword stroke about Dongqing Huang too. Summer Solstice lowered her head and said softly in a trembling voice, third brother please. Lin Fengting's figure was slightly stiff and then he calmed down. The truth is boring and you may not be willing to believe it. Speaking of that sword stroke, the current result is not unexpected. Tianzong was indeed invincible in Eastern Europe and no one could surpass him. But human power is limited after all. In the face of that sword stroke. He thought for a moment. Even if Dongqing Huang to himself stood there with immortality, he couldn't stop that sword stroke, let alone Tianzong with immortality. He laughed self-deprecatingly. Although that is his swordsmanship. Why? Summer Solstice stared at Lin Fengting. Lin Fengting didn't look at her, but looked in the direction of Li Tianlan and whispered, you're about to see it. That was also the purpose of his visit today. Do you know why I'm here? He asked with a smile. Xiaji looked at Lin Fengting with some doubts. Of course she knew the purpose of Lin Fengting's visit, but she didn't know the specific reason. Lin Fengting coughed. I'm seriously injured now. When I was in Eastern Europe, Tianzong didn't want to kill me, but he didn't show mercy when he could spare my life. When he wakes up I'll settle the score with him. But the current situation is that my current combat strength is not even as good as that of an ordinary Thundershocking Realm expert, or even a Fire-Flaming Realm expert. In terms of combat I can't help Tianlan, so naturally I can't help you. He took a few deep breaths and said hoarsely, I'm just a way out, a way for both of you to step down. If I don't come you won't talk seriously. There's nothing to talk about. Summer Solstice said coldly, we will not hand over the Devil Troop, nor will we apologize to the Snowdance Corps and the Dongqing clan. Dijiang is hardly a match for Tianlan. Lin Fengting shook his head. You don't have any bargaining chips. Hong Wei can't but I can. Summer Solstice's voice was extremely calm. If you force your hand no matter what happens to Tianlan, how good will your end be? Lin Fengting shook his head. If something happens to you, he said meaningfully, Xianxia is still in Eastern Europe with Wang Xiaoyao. Summer Solstice's calm eyes suddenly had a touch of fierce and violent madness, but behind this madness was so helplessness. She gritted her teeth and said word by word, this is my own business. You have scruples. So you haven't made a move and you can't do your best. Even if you risk everything, can you really kill Li Tianlan? Summer Solstice's foundation was half ruined now and she had no realm. But in an instant her strength would not be inferior to any expert at the peak of the invincible realm, including deity Lin Fengting and even Wang Tianzong before the breakthrough. Li Tianlan would not be a match for Summer Solstice, even if he had the 13th floor. But if he couldn't beat her he might not die. Once Summer Solstice made a move the consequences were almost doomed. Think about the Beihai he sees when he wakes up. Once you die, how good will Xianxia be in Eastern Europe? Is that Beihai what he wants? Lin Fengting asked. A gaze suddenly fell on Lin Fengting. Lin Fengting turned his head and looked over. In the crowd, beside Wang Yuetong, Song Ci stood there quietly and looked at him with pure eyes. Lin Fengting suddenly thought of an ending. That was the heir of women. He smiled, looked at Song Ci and said softly, you can't support Beihai. Even if you can, it must be very hard. That's not what you want. Song Ci's small mouth opened slightly and she looked stunned and inexplicable. Lin Fengting shook his head and didn't say much. I can kill him. Summer Solstice was silent for a long time before she slowly opened her mouth. She didn't say the consequences but repeatedly emphasized this fact. No matter how tragic her consequences would be, she stood here and had the power to threaten Li Tianlan's life and death. Naturally, she had the bargaining chip to negotiate with Li Tianlan at the last moment. Lin Fengting hesitated and didn't say much. He wanted to say that Summer Solstice could indeed kill Li Tianlan now but not necessarily in a while. He wanted to say that if he really wanted to stop Li Tianlan, he should immediately transfer away the devil troop lying in ambush in Mount Dibbing. But the devil troop was Li Tianlan's goal. Transfer away? Then there was no way to talk about it. So he didn't say much and sat there quietly, waiting for the moment when he could play the role of a stepping stone. The wind and rain were messy. The stage of formidable person was silent. The foot of Mount Dibbing was also silent. Li Tianlan had been standing in the wind and rain for a long time. The wind and rain swept over with a chill. His previous injuries were suppressed little by little. All the anger gradually subsided. Li Tianlan's eyes became more focused and pure. The road to the mountain was ahead. His road. No one could stop him from moving forward. The 13-story building with only a few swords left flew around him. Li Tianlan looked up at the top of the mountain and slowly took a step. Who dares to fight with me? The next second his voice sounded in the whole range of Mount Dibbing. It was calm and confident. Forward. He took the second step. Who is qualified to fight with me? The voice spread from the foot of the mountain with wind and rain and endless darkness. At this moment the whole Beihai was silent. Endless sword energy surged and gathered behind Li Tianlan with the most violent momentum. His figure moved forward along the path. There were more and more sword energy. The path was winding. At the end was the top of the mountain. The vast palaces were continuous, sitting in a large area of flowers and grass. They were quiet, beautiful, majestic, and dignified, with an inviolable sense of solemnity. But at this moment, there was no light on the top of the mountain. All the palaces were in the dark, only gloomy. This was the Wang family of Beihai. The whole picture of the Wang family of Beihai appeared in front of Li Tianlan for the first time. Li Tianlan smiled and said faintly, just as it. He turned around and looked back at the mountain road where he came from. The extremely gloomy and beautiful scenery was very beautiful. He said again, just as it. With his voice, the sword intent that had been gathering behind him suddenly began to roar and surge. There seemed to be countless long swords rubbing and colliding between heaven and earth. The sound was uniform and sharp. It suppressed the wind and rain in Mount Dibbing, suppressed the surging tide in Beihai, and overshadowed the muffled thunder between heaven and earth. Boom! A deafening roar rang out without warning. It seemed that there were thousands of swords roaring and slashing at the same time. The bright sword light illuminated the entire mountain road of Mount Dibbing in an instant, as if it was spreading in daylight. The surging sword light tore the mountain road of Mount Dibbing in an instant. The sword energy flew in all directions, like a shining ring, constantly spreading. The extremely chaotic sound kept ringing with the spreading of the sword light. From the foot of the mountain to the top. The mountain road that had passed by countless people, including countless high-ranking officials, generals, and bigwigs, was suddenly completely torn apart by the sword light. The sword light rushed into the forest on both sides of the road like a tide. The quaint pavilion, the sea of flowers, the neat trees, the flat grass, the clear lake. The sword chi continued to wreak havoc on Mount Dibbing, tearing everything it encountered. It was like countless storms blowing over Mount Dibbing at the same time. In the surging sword light, everything on the way to Mount Dibbing had become riddled with holes in an instant. In the darkness of the wind and rain, the collapsed pavilion, the muddy lake, the broken forest, the broken flowers, and the gully road. After the beauty was torn apart, the ugliness first appeared on Mount Dibbing, looking extremely ferocious. It covered thousands of meters and kept whistling, leaving a conspicuous scar on the incomparably beautiful Mount Dibbing. At this moment many people looked at this scene in a daze, their hearts dead. The great sense of shame made everyone's eyes red on the stage of formidable person. Only Wang Yuetong stood there quietly. She didn't move and even her aura didn't change. But the crystal tears were like beads with broken strings, flowing silently. Li Tianlan's figure was still moving forward. In the heavy rain, every pore on his body seemed to be shining, blooming with sword intent. Endless sword intent flew out from the soles of his feet, and the roaring sound of breaking was continuous. The continuous palaces of Mount Dibbing, which cost a lot, were torn apart one after another. The endless sword light shone on Li Tianlan's face. His expression was calm and dignified. Boom! Emperor Hall, where Sword Emperor and Summer Solstice usually lived, suddenly broke into pieces. All the furniture and appliances inside were torn into pieces. At this moment, Li Tianlan was like a giant waving a weapon, destroying everything on the majestic Mount Dibing, leaving scars one after another. The holy mountain in the hearts of everyone in Beihai province had become fragmented in the blink of an eye. The surging sword light ravaged the palaces one after another. Li Tianlan's pace was getting faster and faster. The sword light was getting sharper and sharper. Broken wood walls and broken appliances kept flying. Crack. The moment the sword light fell, a special sound as if standing on a heavy alloy suddenly sounded. Li Tianlan suddenly turned his head. The world quieted down quietly. Without any warning. In the darkness, the sky was full of red light. The scarlet light lit up the night and the rain. The heavy rain was like blood that kept falling. North, south, east, west. Left and right sides. In 6 directions, the scarlet light became a hole in an instant. It seemed to be the densest domain, directly locking Li Tianlan in the middle. One figure after another appeared around Li Tianlan. Devil troop. 6 devils. They surrounded Li Tianlan, but they were far away from Li Tianlan. Countless scarlet lights bloomed from their eyes and flowed to their whole bodies. Thunder roared in the sky. The lightning turned scarlet. In the sudden silence, the 6 devils raised their arms at the same time. This time they were not empty-handed. Each of the 6 devils held a sword in his hand. The sound of the long sword being unsheathed suddenly resounded through the night sky. With red light, the sword energy soared into the sky. In the east, he started with the sword of King Path of the Wang family of Beihai. The awe-inspiring sword energy kept whistling and blending in the heavy rain. In the west, the sword of Deceitful Path. In the south, the sword of Overbearing Path. In the north, the sword of Emperor Path. On the left, the sword of Saint Path. On the right, the sword of Heavenly Path. The sword light was like a tide. In an instant, it gathered in the domain that surrounded Li Tianlan. 6 sword lights with countless sword energy began to blend like angry waves. The center of the sword lights was Li Tianlan. This was the sword of 6 paths of the Wang family of Beihai. This was the devil troop of the Wang family of Beihai. This was the latest devil with swordsmanship instinct and self-awareness. It was the only group of trump cards in the Wang family of Beihai that could still kill the enemy with swordsmanship. They were all from the Wang family. Swordsmanship and sword intent were interlinked. The sword lights gathered. 6 paths of reincarnation. There was the 6 paths of reincarnation sword. Naturally, there was the 6 paths of reincarnation formation. The scarlet sword light rising into the sky gradually filled the scarlet domain. The sword energy in different directions became more and more majestic. The edge of the sword energy began to converge. Countless sword chis began to fuse together. It was an almost perfect blend. 6 swords in 6 directions almost became one sword in the blink of an eye. This sword, with awe-inspiring and crazy killing intent, was enough to split heaven and earth. This was the ambush that the devil troop had planned for a long time. At this moment, Li Tianlan was standing in the center of the ambush of the 6 devils. So this sword was perfect. Although the power of the 6 people's joint attack was not at the peak of the invincible realm, it was equivalent to the 6 paths of reincarnation made by an invincible realm expert with all his strength. This sword alone was enough to hurt Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan quietly looked at the sword light that was getting closer and closer. There was no solemnity in his eyes. Instead, there was some confusion, then joy, and finally joy. He couldn't figure out why he was ambushed by the devil troop. Did the Wang family of Beihai think that the devils could fight with him without exploding themselves if they stood far enough away? Under the wind and rain in the scarlet light, he laughed. The 13-story building appeared in front of him. Li Tianlan held the Xianyuan sword. This time, to his surprise, the Xianyuan sword suddenly shook in his hand as if it wanted to break free. Li Tianlan was stunned and subconsciously loosened his hand. Buzz. A clear sound suddenly rang between heaven and earth. The pitch-black Xianyuan sword burst out with an incomparably faint and distant clear light. The water-like light illuminated the scarlet domain in an instant. On the stage of Formidable Person, the moment the clear sound rang, Summer Solstice's face changed dramatically. Her body almost jumped up in an instant. She was no longer calm and composed. She stared in Li Tianlan's direction, her body trembling. Her face was twisted as if she had seen a ghost in broad daylight. With an incredible emotion she asked, "What is that?" Chapter 656. People tend to show different reactions when they are absolutely surprised and shocked. At this moment, every reaction of summer solstice had reached the extreme. The wisp of clear light was faint, distant, and not striking, yet it seemed like the clearest color in the world. Light bloomed in the blood-colored domain. It was neither fast nor slow, but it seemed to have a power that could suppress everything. Summer solstice's body was frozen in a very strange posture. Her pupils dilated, her breathing quickened, and her body trembled. The hostess of the Wang family of Beihai, who had always been calm, was in a trance at this time. Her expression was so complicated that it was completely indescribable. At this moment she didn't even know what she was seeing. Was it an illusion? Or was it an illusion? In the blood-colored domain, that wisp of clear light was still blossoming, not too fast nor too slow. Its speed was extremely slow, but it was incomparably heavy, suppressing everything. The moment the clear light spread out, the originally incomparably violent 6 paths of reincarnation array seemed to completely stop. Summer solstice stared at this scene. Except for Lin Fengting, no one here, not even Dijiang, knew what this scene meant. Summer solstice suddenly closed her eyes. The surrounding space began to distort in a visible manner. Summer solstice gradually straightened her body and became extremely focused. Lin Fengting glanced at her. "You're not hypnotized." His voice was a little complicated. "Everything you see is real. In fact, have you ever seen an expert at the peak of the invincible realm be hypnotized?" Even if Summer Solstice's foundation was half ruined, she was still at the peak of the invincible realm. A spirit master who was infinitely close to the transcendent realm might be able to mislead ordinary experts of the invincible realm for a short time, but it was impossible for her to trick experts at the peak of the invincible realm. When she was in Eastern Europe facing Jiang Qiansong, who was close to the peak of the invincible realm, Qin Weibai had tried her best to destroy his will first and let him fall into her trap when he was extremely weak and exhausted. Therefore, everything in front of Summer Solstice was real. Summer Solstice opened her eyes. Her face was deathly pale. Some things were inconceivable, inexplicable, and unexpected. When it happened in front of his eyes, that huge shock would eventually form the clearest emotion. Disbelief. How is this possible? Her body swayed and she almost fell. Song Ci, who was closest to her, quickly supported her body. "This is what you should see." Lin Fengting said, "Now do you understand why Tianzong couldn't block that sword?" 13th floor. Xinyuan Feng. Summer Solstice vaguely understood something. Looking at the clear light in the distance, she was silent for a long time. "Is this the one strike you mentioned?" She slowly turned her head and looked at Lin Fengting. Because she was too emotional, her voice became a little shrill. "If it's not a sword, what is it?" Lin Fengting asked. Summer Solstice smiled bitterly. 13 floors, 13 swords. If Xinyuan Feng is like this, what about the others? It's all the same. Lin Fengting said. Summer Solstice's face was stiff. This time she couldn't even smile bitterly. It was not until this moment that she understood why Wang Tianzong was so seriously injured. He also understood why the coldness of the 9 states created by the human emperor would be completely broken and would require a long time to repair. It turned out that Wang Tianzong was not worse than Dongqing Huangtu. It was not that the coldness of Jiuzhou was inferior to Xinyuan Feng. All of this was because of the clear light in front of him, or rather because of the colorful lights over Eastern Europe. She looked at the scarlet domain that was gradually suppressed by the clear light and thought of the 6 members of the devil troop from the Wang family of Beihai. This was the trump card that Wang Tianzong left for her. 6 devils from the Wang family of Beihai, and they had a very special position in the devil troop. They were one of the most important resources of the Wang family of Beihai. The 6 of them formed a formation. After being transformed and frozen, their strength was not as strong as before. But when the 6 of them attacked at the same time, their cooperation in an instant could still be said to be invincible. Summer Solstice had thought that this strike could seriously injure Li Tianlan. In addition to the injury caused by the Heaven Saber, even if he could defeat Dijiang in the end, he would certainly have little combat power. But no. When that clear light shone, she knew that she was wrong, and she was extremely wrong. The 6 devils injected all their energy into the sword formation in front of them. For Li Tianlan, it was not a trouble but a real surprise. "Why is this happening?" Summer Solstice said softly, her voice almost whispering. "Who knows?" Lin Fengting said blandly, If you force it to be explained, it can only be fate. He looked in the direction of the clear light and said softly, "You really had a chance to pull him into Mount Dibbing. It was the best chance. You would accept him and he would fully accept you. He would join hands with Xianxia, and with the assistance of Dijiang, the Wang family of Beihai would be truly invincible in the world, even surpassing the peak period. What a good opportunity." His voice was a little mocking. "But you gave up." Summer Solstice lowered her head and smiled a little miserably. I know who Dongqing Huangtu is." Lin Fengting did not speak. In his sight, the clear light that illuminated the night spread unstoppably to the entire Scarlet Domain. He looked at it quietly with a complicated look in his eyes. Li Tianlan was also looking at this clear light and his eyes were a little gratified. This was not his sword energy, but it was his sword. The palm-sized Xinyuan sword was exquisite and perfect. Li Tianlan let go of it. The delicate black sword was floating and trembling in front of Li Tianlan. An endless clear light burst out from the sword. The dazzling light was heavy and clear, covering the entire domain. The sword energy of the 6 devils seemed to be absorbed by the clear light emitted by the Xinyuan sword in an instant. The devils stood where they were. The scarlet light constantly flashed in their eyes, as if expressing countless emotions. But their bodies were all stiff where they were. The red domain disappeared. The clear light dispelled all the scarlet. Looking from a distance, the domain covered by the light of the Xinyuan sword was like a huge and pure light shield. The light shield enveloped Li Tianlan and the 6 members of the devil troop. A strong and joyful mood was constantly being transmitted inside the light shield. All the remaining small swords in the 13-story building appeared around Li Tianlan. The black body of the Xinyuan sword shone more and more, like a crystal-clear black jade. The heartbreaking sword lit up. The stunning sword lit up. The aquamarine sword lit up. The sunset sword lit up. The silver moon sword lit up. The joyful mood became more and more obvious, and it was completely transmitted to Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan smiled. In the pure light he smiled like a child. It was still raining heavily. Mount Dibbing was still gloomy. He stood in the extremely dazzling and pure light, stretched out his hand and waved. The 13-story building was broken in an instant. The remaining 6 swords flew out in a rush. All the swords lit up. The sword lights of various colors kept flashing in the pure light shield, becoming more and more obvious. It was an extremely gorgeous picture. In the hearts of everyone in the Wang family of Beihai, it was also an extremely horrifying picture. Summer Solstice was watching, Dijiang was watching, and Lin Fengting was watching. Wang Yuetong, Song Ci, Tang Shi, and Wang Qinglei. Everyone was watching the picture and no one spoke. In the dead silence, Dijiang, who stood in front of everyone, suddenly laughed. The solemnity condensed on him completely disappeared with his smile. His entire being suddenly became extremely relaxed. There was nothing to think about. The so-called luck, the so-called possibility, the so-called hope. There was no need to think about it. He looked at the light in the distance. The battle had not yet begun, but the result was already determined. Dijiang let go of everything. He turned around and looked at the people of the Wang family of Beihai behind him, and at the stone of formidable person facing the sea and the wind and rain on the stage of formidable person. After a long time the corners of his mouth moved but he did not speak. He slowly turned around and walked toward Li Tianlan. The clear sound that seemed to be breaking kept echoing in his body. It seemed to be breaking but it also seemed to be growing. Dijiang's body relaxed and so did his heart. He walked down the narrow steps and as he went down his figure became heavier and heavier. Lin Fengting's eyes slightly condensed and he seemed to feel some pity. "Dijiang," he whispered. "He is indeed a genius." Summer Solstice was silent and did not speak. At the most critical moment Dijiang, who had been tense and adjusting his state, let go of everything. He just wanted to fight. And the pure fighting intent completely bloomed when he was most relaxed, stimulating all his potential. He broke through. It was not the breakthrough of the realm but the breakthrough of the body. He still had the combat capability of the invincible realm, but not the real invincible realm. At this moment, it was the dual thunder veins in his body that broke through. It also meant that Dijiang had completely broken through the last threshold to enter the invincible realm or even the peak of the invincible realm. Summer Solstice looked at Dijiang's back and the light in the distance and suddenly said, "I can talk to Li Tianlan." She stood up. Lin Fengting shook his head with a bitter smile. Now, the corner of his mouth moved. At this moment he really wanted to ask Summer Solstice, "What were you doing earlier?" But when the words were on the tip of his tongue, he suddenly found that what he should ask most was what he had done earlier. If he had done it earlier he would have been in a coma and could not remind Summer Solstice of anything. And even if he had, Summer Solstice might not have believed it. After all, some things were too incredible. Who could believe it without seeing it with their own eyes? He could understand Summer Solstice's thoughts. No one understood the 13 floors. No one in the Wang family of Beihai could even understand the Xianyuan sword. So Summer Solstice had the capital and qualification to persist. Li Tianlan broke through Beihai province, killed the Heaven Saber and could even defeat Dijiang. But she was still there. She thought that if she killed Li Tianlan by force, Li Tianlan could not stop her. She did not want to die and she believed that Li Tianlan did not want to die either. When both sides did not want to die in a stalemate, even if the Wang family of Beihai negotiated, it was relatively equal. And now, with the appearance of the clear light, Li Tianlan was still no match for Summer Solstice. But the 13 floors was different from before. Wasn't it too late to negotiate with Li Tianlan at this time? "It's not the right time yet," Lin Fengting whispered. Summer Solstice glanced at Lin Fengting and said expressionlessly, "When is the right time?" "When Beihai has no choice but to bow its head and bear the humiliation, when he feels that it's enough. He won't destroy the Wang family, but he doesn't want to leave you any hope." Lin Fengting whispered. "He has arrived at Mount Dibing. How can he negotiate before he comes up?" He looked at Dijiang's back and whispered, "Let him go." The devil troop fell. Dijiang failed. Only when he really broke through everything and stood in front of the Wang family of Beihai, Li Tianlan's inner depression might be completely released and he would accept the so-called negotiation, or in other words, sue for peace. Everyone was looking into the distance. In the middle of the palace ruins in the distance the clear light was still bright but it had shrunk a lot. The light shield obliterated the domain of the devil troop and gradually shrank into a beam of light connecting heaven and earth. The 6 evil demons had silently disappeared along with the shrinking of the light barrier. Dijiang's figure was getting farther and faster. He walked out of the path, walked past the World Palace, walked past the only preserved palace behind Mount Dibing, and stood in front of the beam of light looking calmer. This beam of light was extremely dazzling. Dijiang was very close to Li Tianlan, but he could not see Li Tianlan's expression at all. The beam of light shook slowly and gradually faded. In the endless light Li Tianlan slowly walked out. The 13 floors floated around him, shining as if it was ushering in a real new life. Li Tianlan walked steadily and slowly. He looked at Dijiang, raised his eyebrows slightly and asked, "Do you want to die?" Chapter 657. No one thought Li Tianlan's words were arrogant. The 6 demons who were thought to be able to bring Li Tianlan great trouble fell silently. It was a process that was enough to make everyone in North Sea feel numb. To be exact, it was not even a battle but the most terrifying devouring. The clear light occupied the demon domain and slowly shrank. After everything was over, the demon army also disappeared. Li Tianlan. 13th floor. The man and the sword were perfect. Mount Dibing was desolate. There were ruins everywhere, silent and dilapidated. In the past few hundred years, this was the first time an outsider had come here to talk about life and death. It was so domineering and natural. Dijiang looked at Li Tianlan quietly and the delicate small swords floating around him. The black Xianyuan sword shone with a dim light, drifting outside Li Tianlan's sword qi. It was outside Li Tianlan's sword qi but it could merge with it at any time. Such a Li Tianlan was very dangerous. Such a Xianyuan sword was even more dangerous. Dijiang suddenly realized that he was no match for the Xianyuan sword at this moment. He laughed softly and said calmly, "It's over. After you die." Li Tianlan said. Blue light shone on Dijiang's body bit by bit. Emperor Zhang's smile grew wider. "You dare kill me?" This was the first time Dijiang had called himself that. He was the marshal of Zhou state and the commander of the border control corps. No matter where he was, no matter what position he took, this identity would not change. Li Tianlan was also the marshal of Zhou state. He killed Dijiang, which was not only touching the bottom line of the high-level officials of Zhou state, but also blatantly stepping on the faces of all high-level officials of Zhou state. Once such a thing happened, even Dongqing Wudi could not speak for him. I won't kill you, Li Tianlan said calmly, but the Wang family of Beihai will kill you. Not many people will understand you. Not many people will know that you are saving strength for the Wang family of Beihai. Even if they know, they may not accept it. Li Tianlan looked around and said, everything today, these ruins, these humiliation, is because you transferred the power of Mount Dibbing away in advance. This is what I brought to them, but it is also what you brought to them. No one will understand you. Even if I die, it will be a worthy death. Dijiang's voice grew calmer. Unafraid of death? Li Tianlan smiled. The 13-story pagoda slowly disappeared around him. He withdrew all the sword qi and suddenly said, there is another position in Emperor Dong's palace. Are you interested? He knew that he was talking nonsense, but in many cases, nonsense still had an extraordinary meaning. His voice echoed on Mount Dibbing and was transmitted to the ears of everyone on the stage, a formidable person. As long as you join Emperor Dong's palace, everything in Eastern Europe can be handed over to you. Li Tianlan's eyes were deep and he said blandly, in the future Beihai province, the entire Beihai province, can also be handed over to you, to the Jiang family. The stage of formidable person was silent. Dijiang's expression changed abruptly. This sentence did not have much meaning at the moment. But once he failed, when all the curses were added to him, there would always be someone who would think of Li Tianlan's recruitment and huge promise, and there would always be someone who would bring it up. For example, Wang Qinglei and Wang Xiaoyao. In the hearts of everyone in Beihai, with Li Tianlan's words, Dijiang and even the Jiang family would always have another choice. This was something that no one wanted to see. Only the dead would not choose. Li Tianlan's words were tantamount to blocking all his chances after his failure. This was a real heart-wrenching remark. Dijiang took a deep breath. The amazing blue light spread from the soles of his feet to his whole body. An enormous power slowly surged, and the lightning surrounding him had already turned from a faint blue to an incomparably deep and demonic dark blue. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows and smiled playfully. Don't you want to think about it? You know the answer. Dijiang said blandly. At this moment he finally remembered the first time they met in Heaven Capital more than 3 years ago. At that time, Li Tianlan was still very weak in his eyes. But now Dijiang suppressed his inner emotions and became more focused. But they may not believe it. Li Tianlan said. So, Dijiang laughed and his voice was extremely free and easy. I won't have a future. This was the truth. He was no match for Li Tianlan. In today's battle, he and Mount Dibbing were destined to fail. Afterward, whether the Wang family of Beihai wanted to save the influence or give an explanation to the outside world, Dijiang was destined to bear all the infamy and grievances. Dijiang would not join Emperor Dong's palace. At least now, many people were willing to believe in his loyalty. But after being helplessly given up, sacrificed, wronged, and bearing the infamy by the Wang family of Beihai, who would believe that Dijiang would be as firm as ever? Maybe they would want to believe it, but many people were not sure. Dijiang was truly invincible. With another breakthrough of the double thunder veins, he had paved the way to the peak of the invincible realm. Such a person, even if there was a slight possibility of joining East Emperor Palace, would make the Wang family of Beihai uneasy. So he could only die with countless grievances. This was not the will of the Wang family of Beihai. It was the will of the entire Beihai province. So standing here, Dijiang would not have a future and he did not need to think about the future. Li Tianlan looked at him expressionless. We are different. Dijiang said calmly, I have no future but you do. You are the chosen one, shining brightly. Your future is unimaginable, so you have to consider a lot of things. The dark blue color continued to spread on him, getting deeper and deeper. The power was compressed to the extreme in the surging. The space twisted with a clear sound. So you dare not kill me, Dijiang said, but I dare to kill you. Dijiang took a step forward. For a person who had no future, there was nothing he did not dare to do. There was no declaration of war, no warning. Dijiang came directly to Li Tianlan with one step. This step crossed a distance of dozens of meters. Wherever he passed, the stable space was completely shattered by the dark thunder. The pure and silent darkness slowly spread. In an instant, the thunder around Dijiang had become silent and deep black. There was only a fist wrapped in black lightning in front of Li Tianlan. The world was shaking. The extremely violent fist smashed the air with a harsh whistle, and the fierce killing intent shrouded down. There was violent and boiling power everywhere between heaven and earth. At this moment Dijiang was completely a giant who could smash everything. Fast, simple but with pure violence, destroying the world. He moved too fast. Li Tianlan seemed to have no time to draw his sword. Facing the thunderous fist, he raised his arm. Forward. Elbow strike. In the darkness, Mount Dibing suddenly sounded a loud dragon roar. Every joint of Li Tianlan's body was shaking wildly. Dragon fist. The dragon shows its head. The hard elbow hit Dijiang's fist in an instant with a weird curve. The black thunder kept falling and spreading in all directions. The night seemed to be injected with black water. The air was deformed and spread into obvious ripples. Li Tianlan and Dijiang's figures were almost close together. The moment his elbow hit Dijiang's fist, his bent arm suddenly stretched out. He clenched his fist. Sprinting. The wind and rain all over the sky and the black thunder. Li Tianlan's body tightened and his whole body seemed to be pulled over by this punch. The clenched fist penetrated everything as fast as lightning. Dragon fist, azure dragon arrow. The distance between the two was too close. The moment Li Tianlan stretched out his arm, his fist almost touched Dijiang's Adam's apple. Within the distance of less than 2 centimeters, all the power broke out in the shortest distance in an instant. The breath of death rushed to Dijiang with a ferocious taste. Dijiang's upper body suddenly leaned back to the limit. He forcibly blocked Li Tianlan's fist with one hand, and supported the ground with the other hand in the process of leaning back. His legs surrounded by black lightning suddenly galloped like thunder. His body rose horizontally in an instant, spinning wildly. With great power, his legs swept to all the vital parts of Li Tianlan's body without hesitation. Li Tianlan's fist hit the air, and the space was completely shattered in the vibration. The pure power of the two had formed a pseudo-domain infinitely close to the domain of the invincible realm. In the pseudo-domain, Dijiang's speed was faster and his power was more and more violent. Close combat. Close combat. This was the cruelest and most dangerous fight, the most violent and purest collision. The power that was enough to destroy everything came down with his legs like a hurricane. Dijiang's power was too great and his speed was too fast, even leaving a lot of afterimages. Li Tianlan's figure swayed slightly in the afterimages, also leaving afterimages. A lot of Dijiang and a lot of Li Tianlan appeared and disappeared at the same time, dazzling. He still didn't draw his sword. Like a hurricane, his legs swept faster and faster and his figure suddenly rushed to the sky. He put his fingers together like a sword. His figure crossed the afterimages of Dijiang and was quiet in the air for a moment. Just for a moment he was the king of the world. In an instant, the extremely sharp sword energy suddenly burst out from his closed fingers. An extremely pure dark blue flowing light crossed the air. The Wang family of Beihai. Sword of Emperor path. Lin Fengting in the distance clearly saw this scene and his eyes were extremely bitter. Everyone felt extremely complicated when they saw this scene. Li Tianlan. Dijiang. Dijiang's leg technique at this time. Li Tianlan's sword light at this time. The fight between the Li family and the Wang family of Beihai. At this moment, standing in the Wang family of Beihai, the leg technique Dijiang used was the unique technique of the Li family. But Li Tianlan used the kendo of the Wang family of Beihai. What kind of complicated entanglement was this? The dark thunderbolt and the dark blue sword light collided wildly. The 13-story building was completely silent. Hands and feet. The pure limbs kept colliding under the most violent power and speed. The afterimages and sword light all over the sky appeared and disappeared. Dijiang, who had completely entered the fighting state, looked fanatical and his spirit was getting higher and higher. Li Tianlan's face was getting paler and paler, but his eyes were getting brighter and brighter like stars. His originally extremely swift body movement was getting stronger and stronger. Double fists. Legs. His figure rose into the air, getting faster and faster. Dijiang's legs had been spinning like a windmill, and the huge force tore the wind and rain, spreading to the field like a storm. Without any dodging, Li Tianlan's legs were also attacking. At this moment he and Dijiang were using exactly the same unique technique. This was also the unique technique Li Tianlan knew best. Because this was the Li family's martial arts, the Li family's leg technique. Hurricane kick. A second storm suddenly appeared in the narrow battlefield that had a large area of effect. The gale tore up the ruins of the surrounding buildings. Attack. Their legs attacked at the same time. Head on. Both sides used the same technique. When they collided, there was no technique. Li Tianlan's arms were covered with blood and so were his legs. But Di Jiang's state was getting better and more violent. Li Tianlan's movements gradually slowed down. But it was still hurricane kick. Li Tianlan's unique technique didn't change at all. His attack was gradually suppressed by Di Jiang, and his counterattack was getting slower and slower. Without any suspense, when their legs collided again, Di Jiang suddenly roared, and the power of the dual thunder veins that was superior to Li Tianlan's completely broke out. In the pure darkness, like flames and thunderbolts, Li Tianlan's figure was kicked out almost without any room to resist. The wind was whistling in his ears. At that moment, Li Tianlan clearly felt that something that had shrunk for a long time in his body was clearly straightening and slowly pulling in. Di Jiang's figure was getting farther and farther away. Li Tianlan laughed, satisfied. Di Jiang also laughed. He didn't know why Li Tianlan fought with him like this. In his opinion, this was simply the stupidest way of fighting. Li Tianlan had the wind and thunder veins while he had the dual thunder veins. But the martial arts of the Wang family of Beihai was about outbreak. When he broke out with all his strength, his speed was not much slower than Li Tianlan's, but the extreme power brought by the newly broken dual thunder veins was enough for him to completely suppress Li Tianlan. He didn't talk big just now. What he said was true. He had no future, so at this moment, Li Tianlan didn't dare to kill him. But he really dared to kill Li Tianlan. At all costs. Li Tianlan's figure was kicked out, flying in the air and retreating. Di Jiang took a deep breath. Without any hesitation, his body began to run up. His footsteps were getting faster and more violent. The unparalleled power kept shaking the earth. All the ruins within 100 meters were obviously shaking in the process of his sprint. Di Jiang's figure rose into the air. At the same time as him, a bright and dazzling knife light rose into the air. It didn't matter about close combat. It didn't matter about means. This was a battle of life and death. And Di Jiang also had a weapon. Jiang practiced the saber. Di Jiang also practiced the saber. Invincible saber. Eternal time. This was a move of extreme strength. With the support of his dual thunder veins, it was a real fatal move. The knife light tore the air apart and fell down with a long trace. Li Tianlan was also falling. His figure fell to the ground. The skin on his body was completely cracked. His arms and legs were covered with blood, which was black like the blood clots that had existed in his body for a long time. The knife light fell on the top of his head. Li Tianlan reached out his hand. The fastest. The lightest. The steadiest. He put his palms together. The sharp sound and the huge power all over the sky disappeared completely. Li Tianlan clamped Di Jiang's knife with both hands. Di Jiang opened his eyes wide as if he couldn't believe it. And the hands clamping the blade were also exerting force at the same time. Such power was still not as good as Di Jiang's, but Di Jiang didn't feel much suppression of power. Li Tianlan raised his head, looked at Di Jiang's stunned expression and laughed. His eyes were as bright as cold stars, extremely bright. "Thank you," he said softly. Chapter 658. Li Tianlan's tone was extremely sincere. Even his expression looked extremely sincere. A feeling that he hadn't felt for a long time slowly emerged in his body. It was a feeling of contentment and freedom. It seemed that until this moment, Li Tianlan had truly become perfect in martial arts. Di Jiang finally realized what had happened. The power in Li Tianlan's hands was increasing and he felt more and more resistance. The corner of his mouth twitched. He looked at Li Tianlan and said hoarsely, "Dual wind and thunder veins." Li Tianlan looked into his eyes with a gentle expression. "This battle is very meaningful." After the final maneuver of the two academies, it was no longer a secret that Li Tianlan had dual wind and thunder veins. But few people knew that his dual wind and thunder veins had been almost destroyed in the battle with Black Ghost in Eastern Europe and turned into wind and thunder veins. It was difficult for Li Tianlan to explain what the so-called dual wind and thunder veins was. More than 3 years ago he destroyed his wind and thunder veins in Huading in order to make a great breakthrough. But the destroyed wind and thunder veins kept changing during his 3-year journey. The most important thing was to realize the real nirvana in the polar region, which was the current dual wind and thunder veins. It didn't mean that Li Tianlan now had 2 thunder veins and wind veins. Such nirvana could be said to be a mutation in a sense. In the beginning, the wind and thunder veins were hidden in the flesh and blood, like two thick main veins, giving him speed and strength far superior to ordinary people all the time. The new wind and thunder veins were more like two small branches on the main trunk. All this had just begun and it was extremely fragile. So in the battle in Eastern Europe, the new wind and thunder veins were completely broken, leaving only the natural wind and thunder veins to support. Li Tianlan had the dragon vein and the huge luck meant endless vitality. Wisps of white mist were constantly repairing his body. This was not just repairing the injury, but the endless vitality made his body more and more perfect. The new wind and thunder veins were forcibly connected from the broken state under the nourishment of the dragon vein. But the injury at that time seemed to be really serious, so the new wind and thunder veins had been in a state of atrophy. Until today. In terms of overall combat capability, Dijiang was no match for Li Tianlan. But Li Tianlan was competing with Dijiang in strength, which was Dijiang's strongest point. In the field of pure strength, Li Tianlan was almost at an absolute disadvantage and had been suppressed in all aspects. The violent suppression constantly stimulated the atrophied wind and thunder veins in his body, and at the same time stimulated his potential. Li Tianlan could clearly feel the changes in his body. The atrophied new wind and thunder veins stretched little by little under the absolute suppression and stimulation, and the clotted blood that troubled the wind and thunder veins completely flowed out. The dual wind and thunder veins were completely reconstructed under Dijiang's suppression. Li Tianlan's strength and speed had reached a new peak in an instant. Today Li Tianlan was still no match for Dijiang in terms of strength, but he was no longer in a situation where he was absolutely suppressed. The reconstructed dual wind and thunder veins still had a lot of room for growth. Li Tianlan was very satisfied with all this. You lost. Li Tianlan clamped Dijiang's saber, and there was a natural calmness in his words. Dijiang's expression suddenly twisted. No matter how good his mentality was, he still lost his composure at this moment. He went all out and recklessly, but in the end, it became an assist and made the opponent more powerful. His voice was ferocious and manic, a little hysterical. I don't accept this. His voice was loud and fierce. The bright blade suddenly shook and the messy saber light burst out. In Li Tianlan's sight, Dijiang's entire upper body seemed to be expanding, and the muscles of his arms were clearly visible. All the strength was instantly poured into the blade that was clenched in both hands. Dijiang roared, and with the black thunderbolts flying all over the sky, he chopped down hard. Crack. A clear cracking sound rang out. Li Tianlan's eyes were extremely cold. Under the full force of Dijiang, he suddenly twisted his hands that clamped the blade. The full force of the two worked together and directly broke the long saber in Dijiang's hand. Dijiang held the broken saber with both hands, and it almost slid down from the tip of Li Tianlan's nose. The broken saber lost control and rushed to the side. Li Tianlan's figure retreated leisurely. It was like a wisp of smoke and also like an extremely illusory shadow. Dijiang's short saber fell to the ground. The mountain collapsed and the earth cracked. In an instant, centered on the falling point of this saber, the road within hundreds of meters of Mount Dibing suddenly exploded. The surrounding ruins of the palace rushed into the sky under the huge force and were shattered. There were many ferocious and deep cracks on the smooth road. The whole Mount Dibing seemed to be shaking under this saber. The huge cracks tore the earth and spread wildly. Countless boulders and dust condensed with saber light rushed into the air, like a huge wave rising to the sky, surging and overwhelming and smashing toward Li Tianlan. This was the real divine power that shocked the sky. Li Tianlan's figure paused. The crazy power and the dark thunderbolts were completely suppressed by the ruins that swept up. The moment Li Tianlan's figure was blocked, the sword light all over the sky suddenly rose to the sky. The sword light was pure and clear, crystal clear, but there was a kind of resolute atmosphere between the sword light. This was not any sword of the 13th floor. This was amber. The amber that belonged to the Jiang family. It seemed that he thought of the Jiang family and the fallen heaven saber. Dijiang's momentum almost rose wildly out of control. The unparalleled fury made his eyes red. His body tightened and every bone in his body kept groaning because of the huge pressure. Dijiang didn't care at all and he raised his strength at all costs. The amber-colored sword light shattered the heavy and domineering waves. The blooming brilliance instantly tore up the black thunderbolts in the sky. Dijiang saw Li Tianlan step forward. As soon as his consciousness received this message, the amber sword blade had left a long mark on his body. Fast. Incredibly fast. That was unimaginably agile. It seemed that Li Tianlan had only taken one step forward, but the blade had already left a wound on him, and Li Tianlan had already appeared behind Dijiang. The broken saber swept across. Before the blood gushed out of the wound, the broken saber had drawn a perfect circle around Dijiang's body. Step back. Move forward. It was an understatement. The dual wind and thunder veins were reactivated, and they were more powerful than before. Li Tianlan was much stronger than before, whether in strength or speed. The amber was still shining. In the crystal sword light, Li Tianlan's every move at this moment was without the slightest trace of fire. He avoided the saber light and took a step forward. The next second the broken saber broke again. Countless fragments flew into the air, shining with the sharp light of the sword. The fragments of the broken saber cut Dijiang's body. Dijiang had let go of everything. The violent power surged like the roaring sea, covering an area of nearly 100 meters. It was the power that could destroy everything. His eyes were extremely pure. Hatred, humiliation, responsibility, and indignation. He let go of all of them, but he didn't let go of all of them. His figure moved forward. Step forward. Run. Sprint. At this moment he only thought about his own strength. He only wanted to fight. He only wanted to die. The crazy power drove his body to appear directly in front of Li Tianlan. All the space within a radius of 100 meters was completely shattered. The air twisted violently and the shattered space collapsed inward. The extreme destructive power shrouded Li Tianlan in an instant. Li Tianlan raised his palms slightly. Still calm and collected. Still an understatement. Tianguang's spirit-locking platform was high-spirited. The divine weapon broke through the sky, majestic and domineering. Kanglin's sky-chopping saber was insufferably arrogant. Li Tianlan walked through Beihai and broke through everything. Floating Island, Liuli Empress Xingzhou. And then to Mount Dibing. Li Tianlan was different in every city. Li Tianlan had never been as calm as he was now. Indifferent and leisurely, quiet and far away, calm and peaceful. Perhaps at this moment he didn't realize it. Only now was he really perfect. And invincible. He raised his palm, neither fast nor slow, calm and almost elegant. The dazzling sword light flashed. A sword intent appeared at the edge of Dijiang's domain. Li Tianlan's figure disappeared. The next second his figure appeared outside Dijiang's domain. And that sword intent appeared in front of Dijiang and turned into Li Tianlan's appearance. Boom! A fierce fist burst out with black flames all over the sky. Li Tianlan's figure formed by the sword intent was broken, and countless sword energy also penetrated Dijiang's body at the same time. Blood gushed out. Dijiang only felt a ball of fire burning inside him, burning his body and burning his reason. He looked up at where Li Tianlan was, with the fighting intent that had never been extinguished in his pupils. 100 meters away, Dijiang stretched out his palm and said slowly, "I'll kill you for the ancestor." A gust of wind suddenly rose. The wind blowing in the opposite direction rushed through the night sky, rolling up the wind and rain. The raindrops all over the sky completely froze in an instant. The frozen cold spread from afar, covering the space of hundreds of meters in the blink of an eye, also surrounding Li Tianlan. It was almost frozen cold. It was invisible and intangible but extremely awe-inspiring. The blazing white flame burned in Dijiang's hand, and finally turned into dark thunderbolt. Dijiang's whole body was shining. At this moment there was gust of wind, rainstorm, flame and thunderbolt. Even this world was all power. Dijiang stretched out his hand almost piously and made a gesture of drawing a knife. The pure dark thunderbolt almost condensed into a substance in his hand, turning into a blade. Li Tianlan watched quietly and suddenly felt a little bored. This knife was very strange but very familiar. Although the starting gesture was different, there was no essential difference in the knife he saw in Kanglin. Dijiang was the disciple of Sword Emperor, but what Wang Tianzong taught him was still the knife of Jiang family, which was most suitable for double thunder veins. 3 invincible knives of Jiang family. Ages had passed. Only Xianxia was left. Only the Great Tribulation was left. Dijiang held the blade condensed by thunderbolt and gathered it over his head. In an instant, All the power between heaven and earth was gathering toward him crazily. Dijiang's body became extremely tall. It was not an illusion, but under the extreme power his body really expanded for a short time. At a distance of hundreds of meters, Dijiang's momentum instantly reached an all-time peak. Go to hell. The black blade chopped down. This was Jiang family's invincible knife. It was Beihai's full outbreak. The dark blade was like light and lightning. At this moment there was no knife light. The blade condensed by thunderbolt in Dijiang's hand extended wildly in his hand, and in a flash, it had extended to a distance of hundreds of meters. The pitch-black blade trembled slightly and crazily. Every tremble was equivalent to Dijiang's most powerful knife. Just in an instant, Dijiang's blade had trembled hundreds of times. The completely chaotic power filled everything. Mount Dibing, which was already in ruins, became more and more broken under the blade. Li Tianlan watched in silence. This knife was the tribulation of 1,000 years. It was the combination of two invincible knives. In terms of the abundance of knife intent, this knife was still not as good as the heaven knife at that time. But the knife that Dijiang, who was at his peak, gave up everything and wielded had surpassed DK in terms of power. It would not stop until one of them died. If he didn't use all his strength, Li Tianlan couldn't block this knife. But it didn't matter whether he could block it or not. The blade trembled in the air, and the almost unparalleled power destroyed heaven and earth. Li Tianlan took a step forward. His figure disappeared. The dark blade extended to a length of hundreds of meters, fiercely chopping from the sky to the ground. The earth shook and the mountains shook. Almost everything on Mount Dibing had been completely smashed. This knife almost drained all of Dijiang's essence, qi and spirit. There was no trace of power in his body. He froze in place and was silent for a long time. Li Tianlan was already standing behind him. He put one hand on Dijiang's shoulder and his killing intent was hidden. Li Tianlan was too fast now. He couldn't block this knife, but he could completely avoid it. Avoiding was not escaping. He appeared directly behind Dijiang. At this moment, all the vital parts of Dijiang's body were under his control. Why is it so fast? Dijiang's voice was extremely hoarse. Li Tianlan's voice was still calm without any anger. It's you who are too slow. Boom. The huge power fell on Dijiang's extremely weak body. Dijiang, who had been drained of all his strength by the knife, softened and curled up uncontrollably. Kneel down. Li Tianlan whispered. Dijiang's knees had been completely bent. He couldn't resist the power of Li Tianlan's hand. But the moment before his knees were about to kneel, he suddenly roared and tried his best to rush forward. His body was lying on the ground, beaten by the crazy night rain. He was extremely embarrassed and looked extremely ugly. It's much uglier than kneeling down. Li Tianlan said, you look like a useless dog. Dog? Dijiang laughed. His voice was hoarse and he said word by word, even if I am a dog, I am a dog of Beihai, not a dog that kneels in front of you. Li Tianlan was silent for a while. It was hard for them to get close to the stage of formidable person. Li Tianlan could see the figure on the stage of formidable person. The figure on the stage of formidable person could also see him. It was extremely clear. Under everyone's gaze, Li Tianlan slowly squatted down. The corner of his mouth moved slightly as if he was saying something. He said it for a long time very seriously and sincerely. Dijiang's ears were completely silent. But Li Tianlan seemed to keep talking. After a long time, Dijiang suddenly understood something. He laughed miserably. At this moment he was sure. It was not that he couldn't hear it. It was that Li Tianlan, who seemed to be saying something, actually said nothing. It was so despicable. Li Tianlan slowly stood up. On the stage of formidable person, most people were guessing what Li Tianlan had said to Dijiang. Among the silent but thoughtful crowd, only one person was moving forward. Her figure was ethereal. She walked down the steps and stepped into the sky. The ethereal and poignant sword light lit up. It was beautiful, but it was extremely determined and silent. The sword light was mixed with extremely bright lightning. She and the sword flew across the sky and the blade flew toward Li Tianlan. The poignant sword light illuminated Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan watched it quietly without dodging. He gazed deeply at the sword light. Because the sword light illuminated Wang Yuetong's face. Chapter 659. The flying sword light turned from bright to dazzling. On Mount Dibbing in the wind and rain, the blue light that pierced the sky seemed to be the only light between heaven and earth. Li Tianlan raised his head and watched the sword light approach from afar. It was the most poignant and beautiful sword light he had ever seen. It was shining, determined, heartbroken, helpless, but with the last persistence of Mount Dibbing. The sword light was reflected on Wang Yuetong's face. Her beautiful face became clearer and clearer. Crystal tears mixed with the wind and rain. Her eyes were a little desperate, but the sword carried the power that she could not take back. It went straight forward. No one could understand Wang Yuetong's inner feelings at this moment. Summer solstice couldn't, and neither could Li Tianlan. In this world, if one didn't experience many things personally, one wouldn't feel the so-called empathy at all. Li Tianlan looked at Wang Yuetong with tears in his eyes. He looked at her helplessness and persistence. The cold rain was falling. She was desperate. At this moment, Li Tianlan's mind was full of one sentence. If only life was like the first time we met. The poignant and stubborn sword light flew all the way with a madness that was close to despair. Li Tianlan laughed. She was his woman. And the sword fell on his heart at this time. He saw it with his own eyes. It was the most poignant and beautiful sword. But he thought of Dongqing Rushi. In that manner, facing the devil troop and the Beihai Corps, Dongqing Rushi resolutely drew out her sword. How beautiful was the sword light when it was quietly unsheathed. Nostalgia and despair, helplessness and reluctance. They were all beautiful. In the wind and rain, Li Tianlan smiled and straightened his chest, aiming his heart at the sword edge. The blue light fell in front of Li Tianlan like a meteor. The sword light kept spreading out, but it was suppressed and shrank back. The sword edge pierced Li Tianlan's clothes. The tip of the sword was close to Li Tianlan's flesh. But there was no blood. The extremely stable blue light trembled violently. Wang Yuetong bit her lip and blood flowed down the corner of her mouth. Li Tianlan looked at her and his smile was extremely calm. "Why don't you hide? Hide." Wang Yuetong cried out. Countless preparations, countless bravery, and all the resoluteness had disappeared in the process of the sword light leaping over. Wang Yuetong's arms trembled. She completely broke down and burst into tears. The tip of the sword gently pressed against the skin on his chest. Li Tianlan's smile was like a mask. "What about you? Why didn't you stab it in? Just a little more." The tip of the sword could pierce Li Tianlan's chest and then penetrate his whole body. But Wang Yuetong stopped. Her sword stopped stiffly in Li Tianlan's chest. Her arms trembled and the sharp sword light became extremely scattered. Her emotions were like scattered sword lights, and the calmness that she had pretended to be shattered at this moment. She gritted her teeth and cried, "I don't have any strength left." "Then get out of my way," Li Tianlan said quietly. He let Wang Yuetong's sword point at his chest and looked up at the stage of formidable person. It was only a distance of 200 meters. But in the dark of the night he could still clearly see everyone's expressions. Panic, solemnity, anger, calmness and hatred. On the quaint and narrow stone platform, the stone of formidable person, carved with hundreds of years of glory of Beihai, stood there facing the wind and rain, silent and calm. "Go back." Wang Yuetong bit her lip and sobbed in a low voice. Her voice was pleading, "Please, Tianlan." Li Tianlan looked at her quietly. Wang Yuetong's eyes were extremely weak. She used to think that she could be strong, so she did not beg Li Tianlan to go back when they met before. She thought that she could face everything. But at this moment, when the tip of the sword really touched Li Tianlan's skin, the severe pain seemed to completely tear her body apart. Behind her was the stage of formidable person. Dijiang was defeated. The 7 sword-holding families were defeated. She stood in front of Li Tianlan. She was no longer herself. She was the last insistence of the entire Wang family of Beihai. He had to make a move. But she really couldn't. Li Tianlan could not feel Wang Yuetong's emotional collapse. But he could roughly understand her feelings. His smile faded little by little and his whole person became extremely cold. Oh. He shook his head and looked into Wang Yuetong's eyes. "Get out of the way." Wang Yuetong shook her head desperately, tears splashing out. "Do you know why I didn't hide?" Li Tianlan said quietly. "Because I know very well that even if I didn't hide I wouldn't die. At most I would be seriously injured." He thought of their first meeting again. "You and I shouldn't have met. From the beginning it was a mistake." Oh, it's not. Wang Yuetong's figure trembled violently. She held the sword with one hand, unable to put it down or stab forward, while the other hand covered her chest, which was almost out of breath because of the pain. She was very afraid of Li Tianlan like this. He was too calm and too indifferent, as if he was a kind of extreme reason that could abandon everything. Just take it that I let you down. Li Tianlan looked at the sword in front of his chest and said calmly, I'll feel better if you stab me. Please don't say that, okay? Wang Yuetong's body trembled and her eyes grew dimmer. Li Tianlan was silent for a while. He seemed to want to say a lot more, but he finally fell silent. In the silence, he took a step forward against the sharp tip of the sword. The sword against his chest did not stab in. Wang Yuetong also took a step back. Please don't do this. Tianlan. Wang Yuetong shook her head hard. She had bitten her lips so hard that blood came out, which was shocking. Please. Li Tianlan did not speak. Facing the bright sword edge, his pace was extremely stable, and he kept moving forward without any hesitation. He was moving forward. Wang Yuetong was retreating. The sword edge was always close to Li Tianlan, but it never stabbed in. Li Tianlan looked at Wang Yuetong. Looking at her face full of panic, looking at her bewilderment, looking at her helplessness, looking at her despair, looking at her tears, looking at her giving up her dignity in front of everyone, giving up everything and begging her bitterly. He kept moving forward. Every step he took seemed to step on Wang Yuetong's reserve and pride. The nobility of the little princess of the Wang family of Beihai seemed to become fragmented and humble under his feet. Wang Yuetong never put down her sword. She did not mind being humble in front of Li Tianlan. But if she put down her sword, it meant that the Wang family of Beihai had lost its last persistence. What kind of contradictory scene was this? One moved forward and the other retreated. The two of them walked 100 meters. They were so close, separated by the wind, rain, and sword light. The sword light was shining. The wind and rain were dim. Everything was cold. Li Tianlan's heart twitched fiercely. The woman in front of him was his woman. She held the sword against his chest and kept crying. Every drop of her tears seemed to leave wounds in his heart. There was a flash of anger in his eyes. As he moved forward, he suddenly looked up and stared at every figure on the stage, a formidable person. Can the dignified Wang family of Beihai only send one woman at this critical moment? His voice was like a surging tsunami or a thunder sweeping through the sky, majestically suppressing everything. Who dares to fight with me? Come out. Does the Wang family of Beihai, who only knows how to hide behind a woman, deserve to be called the first family in the dark world? Bullshit. His eyes were extremely arrogant. His voice was extremely contemptuous. All the humiliation fell on the heads of all the people of the Wang family of Beihai after they lost the barrier. Bastard. In the furious voice, a burly figure on the edge of Mount Dibing suddenly rushed toward Li Tianlan. Strong electric light burst out from him. Wang family of Beihai, code name Tide. The burly figure strode forward faster and faster. I'll kill you. Li Tianlan's eyes became extremely cold in an instant. The ghastly killing intent suddenly spread out with sword intent. At this moment, Li Tianlan's expression was still calm. But during the hundreds of meters of advance and retreat, every drop of Wang Yuetong's tears was like the hottest oil, constantly pouring on the fire in his heart. Such a Beihai province. Such a Wang family of Beihai. There was the invincible sword emperor here. He was talented and bold. He was amazing. There was the calm and open-minded Heaven Saber DK, who was calm and indifferent. He also appreciated Dijiang's bravery and loyalty from the bottom of his heart. The Wang family of Beihai was too big. There were a lot of people he liked here. There were also a lot of people he didn't like. When the enemy was in front of them, the huge Wang family of Beihai actually put all its persistence on a young woman. They hid on the stage a formidable person. They stood behind Wang Yuetong. It was quiet. Li Tianlan looked at the crowd in the dark. Why did he take it for granted? He raised his palm indifferently. The wind and rain rolled all over the sky, and the endless rain seemed to connect into a line in an instant. The sword light shone in the rain. Li Tianlan waved his palm. The rain with sword energy suddenly appeared in front of Tide. The soft rain cut the tears, went all the way down and cut his body in an instant. Blood burst out all over the sky. Li Tianlan strode forward faster and faster. Wang Yuetong kept retreating and her hand holding the long sword kept shaking. Who else wants to die? Li Tianlan's voice was calm but there was a touch of extreme sharpness. No one spoke. At this moment, everyone could feel Li Tianlan's undisguised killing intent. The young Donghuang seemed to be completely enraged by Wang Yuetong's embarrassment. At this moment whoever dared to step forward would almost end up like tied. Don't kill anymore. Why are you doing this? Wang Yuetong cried louder. Li Tianlan looked at her deeply. He could see her embarrassment and struggle. The people of the Wang family of Beihai could also see it. But no one spoke on the silent stage of formidable person. Li Tianlan laughed. At this moment Wang Yuetong carried all the persistence of the Wang family of Beihai, the last persistence. There must be an explanation for such persistence. The Wang family of Beihai could not give such an explanation. But Li Tianlan could. Everything that happened today. Li Tianlan looked into Wang Yuetong's eyes. I'm sorry. But at the same time the Wang family of Beihai is sorry. He looked at the stage of formidable person getting closer and closer. He fought through Beihai and passed by one city after another for this goal. He had come here. No one could stop him from moving forward. Not Wang Yuetong. Not Lin Fengting. Not either. Li Tianlan reached out his hand. He reached out his hand to Wang Yuetong. The bright and slender sword still stood in front of them. The long sword was very long. He seemed to want to touch Wang Yuetong's face. But the long sword that represented too many things separated them from each other. His palm was always a little bit away from Wang Yuetong's face. Li Tianlan smiled and said softly, I'll give you the explanation you want to give to Beihai. He suddenly clenched his palm. The sharp sword energy suddenly scattered and then gathered quickly. A wild wind blew under the heavy rain. The wind with sword energy blew the space and the whole world seemed to be compressed. The heavy but not sharp sword energy controlled Wang Yuetong's body in an instant. Wang Yuetong opened her eyes wide in horror and screamed, No! The sword energy fell on her and on her hand. The invisible sword energy pushed her forward with an irresistible force. Only one step. Swoosh. With a dull sound the bright sword blade pierced into Li Tianlan's chest and came out from his back. Wang Yuetong's eyes turned red in an instant. She loosened her grip on the sword and her body trembled. Li Tianlan's palm touched Wang Yuetong's face. It was so soft and gentle. Wang Yuetong looked at him with dull eyes. At this moment, it seemed that everything had lost its meaning. Li Tianlan, whose mouth was bleeding, looked at the sword blade trembling slightly in his chest and narrowed his eyes. At that moment he forcibly controlled Wang Yuetong's body and the sword in her hand. He voluntarily let Wang Yuetong pierce his body with the sword. Maybe it was only a centimeter away, and the sword would have pierced his heart. This feeling he laughed. It hurts. A dense white mist slowly appeared around him. The last trace of worry in Li Tianlan's eyes completely disappeared. He looked at the stage of formidable person, his eyes full of indifference and firmness. His body tensed up slightly and in front of everyone's eyes his arms suddenly shook. Crack. With a clear cracking sound, the long sword in Li Tianlan's chest suddenly broke. The broken long sword fell at Li Tianlan's feet, and the sword blade that came out from his back flew out. Li Tianlan spat out a mouthful of blood. More blood flowed from his chest. Tianlan. The dull Wang Yuetong finally came to her senses and rushed to Li Tianlan, but she did not dare to touch him. In a very short time the blood flowing out of Li Tianlan's chest had slowed down a lot. The sword wound was still badly mutilated and could not heal for the time being. But Li Tianlan's breath, which had suddenly weakened for a moment, became stable again. Tianlan. Wang Yuetong's voice was chaotic and crazy. Li Tianlan took her palm and pulled her body over. He reached out and lifted her face. Looking at the dazed, chaotic and a little crazy eyes he ordered, Close your eyes. Wang Yuetong's long eyelashes gently trembled in the wind and rain, but she tried to keep her eyes open. Li Tianlan lowered his head and kissed her slowly but firmly in everyone's sight. Chapter 660. The corners of Wang Yuetong's lips were soft and slightly cool. There was a smell of blood in the fragrance, like rose petals stained with blood. The wind and rain raged on Mount Dipping. Wang Yuetong opened her eyes wide, watching Li Tianlan hold her in his arms and hold her waist. His palms were constantly exerting force, hot and warm. Feeling each other's breath, Wang Yuetong's long eyelashes fluttered. Finally, she closed her eyes and put her hands around Li Tianlan's neck. Strong wind, heavy rain, night. Blood and ruins. The solemn crowd. The world was like a background full of darkness and depression. The young man and woman who had each other held each other tightly, completely forgetting themselves. In the flashing lightning, this was destined to be a scene that everyone would remember for a lifetime. It was like attachment but also like parting. Wang Yuetong closed her eyes, grabbed Li Tianlan and bit his lips hard. Her tears seemed to have run out. Her body became extremely cold. The blood on Li Tianlan's chest was still flowing, falling on her body, which was shocking. That sword strike was her explanation to Beihai. It was also Li Tianlan's explanation to her. The slowly flowing blood gradually solidified. Wang Yuetong held Li Tianlan tightly, as if she wanted to engrave his breath into her blood. Li Tianlan slowly let go of her, looked at her face and did not speak for a long time. Her face was pale and her eyes were red because of crying. Her spirit was getting more and more haggard. The sobbing not long ago seemed to have completely calmed down. Her bloodshot eyes were empty and deathly still, as quiet as a grave. She looked at Li Tianlan quietly, reached out her hand gently and smiled. Tianlan. Wang Yuetong's voice was soft and extremely steady. Her emotions seemed to have calmed down, or she had no emotions at all. Her slender fingers gently touched the wound on her chest. Wang Yuetong's smile was pale and desperate. This is not my explanation to the Wang family of Beihai, at least not all of it. Her voice grew quieter and quieter, but a faintly discernible light began to radiate from her eyes. It was extremely stubborn and unyielding. Li Tianlan's heart gradually sank, but he did not say anything. Actually, I don't need to explain to the Wang family of Beihai. Do you understand? I'm a part of this place. Standing here is my duty, my responsibility. It's an innate responsibility that I can't escape from. I've lived here since I was young. This is my home. You are my enemy. If I don't stand in front of you, then I owe you. I can't repay such a debt. Li Tianlan looked at her quietly. He saw the light in her eyes become firm and clear. It was a choice. Unshakable and decisive. Actually, you don't owe me anything. In any case, I don't think you owe me anything. No matter what you think, you've already paid me back for that sword attack. I respect your choice. She slowly retreated. The palm stained with Li Tianlan's blood opened. The broken sword reappeared in his hand. The distance between the two grew further and further. She stared at Li Tianlan seriously. You can do whatever you want. You can destroy Mount Dibbing, but before that you must destroy me first. Because I'm the daughter of the Wang family of Beihai. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and watched Wang Yuetong retreat further and further. At this moment in the tragic and almost cruel situation, she finally made her choice. Between Li Tianlan and the Wang family of Beihai, she chose the Wang family of Beihai. Just like many times before, she chose Li Tianlan between the Wang family of Beihai and Li Tianlan. At any time she had her own insistence. Li Tianlan's reaction was very calm. There was no sadness or hesitation. You should remember one thing. You're not only the daughter of the Wang family of Beihai, but also my woman. Li Tianlan looked at her and said in a calm but irresistible voice, You're my woman, so you should listen to me. Wang Yuetong was still retreating. She shook her head and wanted to say, I'm not your woman anymore. But Li Tianlan didn't give her a chance. He looked over Wang Yuetong at the stage of formidable person, which was close behind her, and reached out his hand. You respect my choice and I respect yours. He said expressionlessly, so now you have to be obedient. Wang Yuetong's figure suddenly shook. There was nothing behind her, but in an instant, a vortex formed by extremely twisted air directly surrounded her. The twisted space kept shaking and finally formed a vortex with a radius of about 10 meters. The vortex rotated slowly, trapping Wang Yuetong in it. Wang Yuetong, whose face changed dramatically, suddenly realized something. She raised the broken sword in her hand without hesitation, and the dazzling lightning instantly covered the entire vortex. The vortex was still rotating slowly. The lightning driven by Wang Yuetong disappeared in an instant. A trace of panic flashed in Wang Yuetong's eyes. The sword energy condensed on the blade of the broken sword and she stabbed straight ahead. The slowly rotating vortex was extremely real but also extremely illusory. The blade stabbed into the vortex, but it drove Wang Yuetong's body to rotate. The condensed and twisted vortex was completely unbreakable for her. Confinement. Li Tianlan's figure passed by Wang Yuetong and walked toward the stage of formidable person. Let me out. Tianlan, let me out, let me out. Wang Yuetong's crisp voice sounded extremely sharp because of her excessive impatience. Li Tianlan ignored her and didn't look back. Let me out. You can't do this to me. I'm not your woman. I'm not anymore. The wind and rain raged. Lightning flashed and thunder roared. In the storm, Li Tianlan stepped on the steps of Zhuanyuantai. The ancient steps went all the way up with a subtle slope. At the end was the stone of formidable person. Are you sure you want to do this? Summer Solstice's voice floated down quietly. The Wang family of Beihai owes a lot of people an explanation. Li Tianlan took the second step. I'll take it today. Go back. This is not an enemy you are qualified to face. In the furious roar, countless figures rushed out of the ruins behind Li Tianlan. Wang Donghu, Li Tianlan, Deputy Minister of Beihai Internal Defense Force. Come and fight with me. Come on. Wang Huatu, Field Division Commander of Beihai Corps. Get down here and I'll spare your life. Little bastard of the Li family, your father is here. Get down here and cow. Heavenly son of a bitch. If *CKU, come and fight with me for 300 rounds. Groups after groups of figures appeared. A large number of figures rushed and charged in the night rain. The ruins of Mount Dibbing kept shaking. The dazzling lights suddenly lit up on Mount Dibbing. More and more people rushed to the stage of formidable person. Insults, provocations and all kinds of ugly words filled everyone's ears in an instant. The first group of people who rushed over cursed and rushed to the stage of formidable person without hesitation. More and more people were still rushing over. Summer Solstice's face suddenly changed and became extremely ugly. Dijiang transferred all the people in Mount Dibbing away. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. She also acquiesced. Therefore, in the current Mount Dibbing, except for Dijiang, Wang Yuetong, and the 6 devils lying in ambush on Mount Dibbing, there was no other power. And now this group of people came from the foot of the mountain. In other words, they came from the troops that had gone to Kanglin and the floating island. No one thought that so many people would turn around and come back in the middle of the journey. But everyone could understand that by standing here, they not only violated the order of the Wang family of Beihai, but also the military order of the army headquarters of Zhongzhou State. Military orders must be obeyed. Tianlan. No. Wang Yuetong kept hitting the whirlpool around her. Her voice was a little frightened. Her sharp voice was instantly suppressed by a lot of insults. On the stage of formidable person, Li Tianlan turned around and looked at the surging crowd. High-level officers, middle-level officers and grassroots elites were densely packed. The Deputy Minister of the Internal Defense Force of Beihai, who rushed to the stage of formidable person first, was less than 50 meters away from Li Tianlan. This middle-aged man, who looked to be nearly 50 years old, was shining with lightning. His body was burly and majestic. He roared and kept charging, defending the most sacred place on Mount Dibbing. His eyes were full of determination. Countless people followed behind him, charging forward, regardless of everything. Without hesitation. This could be said to be a heroic charge. It was fanatical, heroic, and could even be said to be worthy of praise and tears. Li Tianlan looked at them. His expression was as calm as a mask. You all want to die, he said in a calm voice. It was not a question but an affirmative sentence. Before his voice died away, Wang Donghu, the Deputy Minister of the Internal Defense Force of Beihai, who rushed to the front, had directly rushed over. With all the strength in his body, he roared and smashed directly at Li Tianlan. Bang! The hard fist slammed into Li Tianlan's palm. Li Tianlan's body lit up. It was incomparably illusory and real. The soaring sword light illuminated the stage of formidable person. The gushing blood suddenly burst out under the shining sword light, like a smashed watermelon. The red juice kept flying against the wind and rain, and the white broken bones were spread on the stage of formidable person. Wang Donghu's body disappeared. The blood and broken flesh on the ground were the last traces of his existence. There was no hesitation or hesitation. Decisive, indifferent and vicious. Li Tianlan just stood there, facing the charging crowd in endless anger. The surging sword light was getting brighter and brighter. The sword light suppressed the lightning and the flame, becoming the only light on Mount Dibing. Bang! Another high-level member of the Wang family of Beihai exploded in front of Li Tianlan. Countless figures rushed forward in an endless stream. Everyone seemed to be completely crazy. With red eyes, gritted teeth and ferocious expressions, they rushed over with their most powerful attacks. No one thought about life and death anymore. The only thought in everyone's mind was to attack. Even if they died, they would make their attacks fall on Li Tianlan. Kill him. Tear him apart. The experts of the Wang family of Beihai at the front exploded one after another. A steady stream of elites rushed up from the back like crazy demons, completely in a state of desperate charge. Go back. All of you go back. Don't kill anymore, Tianlan, I beg you, don't kill anymore. Summer Solstice's stern voice and Wang Yuetong's desperate voice echoed in the fanatical roar, shattering the wind and rain. The charging crowd did not waver. Rush forward. Death. Madness. Because this was the stage of formidable person. It was the holy land that their ancestors had guarded for hundreds of years. No one could desecrate this place. Li Tianlan was an enemy. He stood on the stage of formidable person, so he was a mortal enemy. Kill him. Bite him to death. Tear him to pieces. In the earth-shaking roar, Li Tianlan was indifferent, like a machine born for killing. The roar in front of him, which was powerful enough to shake the soul, did not make him waver or fear. A large number of crazy people rushed to his current position at the risk of their lives, which added a touch of unparalleled fierceness to his heart. None of you are afraid of death. Then all of you should die. The narrow stage of formidable person suddenly lit up with a sword light that almost filled the entire passageway. The majestic sword light surged like a tide, stirring crazily. Countless people rushed up and died in the sword light. More and more people rushed forward. They died in the sword light again. Continued to rush. Kill again. Kill again. Kill again. At this moment, there was only death in front of Li Tianlan. High morale, a heroic charge and a brave death. If you want to die, then go to hell. Tonight Li Tianlan completely showed his most ruthless side. Blood and broken bones were all over the passageway of the Xianyuan platform, washed down by the rain. Blood flowed like a river. If a human stood in his way, he would kill a ghost. Countless elites of the Wang family of Beihai rushed up and died in the sword light. From beginning to end, Li Tianlan stood in his position, motionless. The sword light illuminated his whole body, making him extremely dazzling in the dark night. His face was full of chilling indifference, without a trace of hesitation. Tianlan. I beg you, don't kill anymore, I beg you. Wang Yuetong, who was trapped in the vortex, suddenly knelt down and kowtowed to Li Tianlan. Countless blood and corpses were enough to make people despair. Wang Yuetong's forehead touched the ground hard and her mind was blank. The killing continued and it became more and more crazy. There was no pity in Li Tianlan's eyes. Instead, there was a touch of chilling anger, and he was extremely majestic. For the first time he took a step down. The sword light suddenly became louder, and there seemed to be countless sword energy whistling between heaven and earth, as if it was about to destroy the entire stage of formidable person. Li Tianlan. Wang Yuetong stood up abruptly and screamed in despair. Her voice was sharp and pained, and it was filled with shocking hatred. For the first time the sword light lit up in the cage-like vortex. Wang Yuetong raised her palm. The next second Li Tianlan, Summer Solstice and Lin Fengting. Everyone's face suddenly changed. The sword light on the stage of formidable person disappeared in an instant. Li Tianlan's figure violently knocked away the charging crowd. The sword formation of 13-story buildings immediately appeared beside Wang Yuetong. In a split second. It was a close call. The sword light in Wang Yuetong's hand gave off an extremely desperate light. There was no hesitation or hesitation. Swish. In a slight but earth-shaking sound, Wang Yuetong stabbed her own heart with the sword. Countless streams of sword qi exploded. Summer Solstice and Lin Fengting rushed down. Everyone on the stage of formidable person rushed down. The 13-story buildings surrounded the vortex, stirring everything into a blur. Countless airwaves spread out and finally subsided. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. The vortex disappeared. The 13-story buildings slowly rotated around Li Tianlan and Wang Yuetong. In the center of the sword formation, Li Tianlan directly grasped the blade of the broken sword. But it was still half a second too late. The blade had already pierced into Wang Yuetong's chest and came out from her back. In the dead silence, Wang Yuetong looked at Li Tianlan quietly. She looked at Li Tianlan's palm and asked weakly, "Does it hurt?" Blood flowed down Li Tianlan's palm. He held the blade with a twisted face. Looking at Wang Yuetong, he couldn't say a word for a while. Wang Yuetong's figure swayed slightly and then she fell backward. Li Tianlan held her in his arms. The extremely gentle sword energy immediately sealed her wound. "How is Yuetong?" "Li Tianlan. How is Yuetong?" Summer Solstice's voice was almost screaming. "If anything happens to Yuetong, get out of here." Li Tianlan suddenly roared in rage. The sword formation of the 13-story buildings suddenly shook. The vast sword energy almost fell from the end of the sky. The few swords left in the 13-story buildings shone at the same time. The sword energy was dense and extremely fierce. Wang Yuetong lay quietly in Li Tianlan's arms. She opened her eyes and looked at the rainy sky, lost in thought. "I'm sorry." Li Tianlan looked down at her face. After a long time he said in a very hoarse voice. Wang Yuetong did not respond. She could not stop Li Tianlan. Nor could she stop Mount Dibbing. She could only choose to kill herself. She didn't want to see it. She didn't want to see it. She didn't want to experience anything. How nice would it be to leave like this and never look back? Li Tianlan's body trembled slightly. In silence his eyes turned red. Wang Yuetong aimed the sword directly at his heart. At this moment he was extremely grateful to Dijiang. If Dijiang hadn't stimulated his dual wind and thunder veins and greatly increased his speed, the blade might have really penetrated Wang Yuetong's heart at that moment. He appeared in front of Wang Yuetong and didn't stop the sword. But at the most dangerous moment he grasped the blade and finally made the blade deviate by an inch. Wang Yuetong's blade didn't pierce her heart, but the blade went through her chest. The huge sword energy caused unimaginable damage to her body in an instant. What would the final result be? Li Tianlan was not sure at all. Wang Yuetong moved laboriously and looked at Li Tianlan. "You're crying." She reached out and touched Li Tianlan's face. It was very gentle but extremely weak. "Don't talk. Don't talk. I'm here. I'm here." Li Tianlan repeated incoherently, holding Wang Yuetong's hand tighter and tighter. Wang Yuetong coughed up a mouthful of blood and her eyes gradually dimmed. "I can't guard Beihai and I lost you. Tianlan, I'm so tired." "It's okay." Li Tianlan said quickly. "It's okay. Don't close your eyes. Do you hear me? Don't close your eyes." Wang Yuetong smiled laboriously. "The Wang family of Beihai. Dongqingri. I'll pay for it with my life, and give you an explanation." "Stop it. Look at me, Yuetong, look at me." Wang Yuetong tried to open her dim eyes and looked at Li Tianlan. In her sight, the man who was unforgettable to her was getting more and more blurry. Before her consciousness fell into the boundless darkness, her heart was filled with reluctance. Her eyes closed little by little slowly. "Let us in. I can save her. Li Tianlan, let me in." Summer Solstice's voice, which became a little distorted because of her eagerness, suddenly sounded. "I have half of immortality. I can save her." Li Tianlan seemed to wake up from a dream and waved his hand suddenly. The sword formation of the 13-story building was completely dispersed. Summer Solstice staggered to Wang Yuetong's side. Without hesitation she crushed a pendant on her body and poured a small amount of liquid into Wang Yuetong's mouth. She touched Wang Yuetong's heartbeat. Wang Yuetong's heartbeat was extremely weak under the serious and fatal injury. Summer Solstice suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. The mistress of the Wang family of Beihai, who had been carefree for most of her life, grabbed her daughter's hand and burst into tears. "I'm going to take her away." Feeling Wang Yuetong's gradually stabilizing but extremely weak breath, Li Tianlan looked at Summer Solstice and said word by word, "I'll kill anyone who dares to stop me." "Tianlan, she's more suitable to stay in Mount Dibbing now." Lin Fengting came over and glanced at Wang Yuetong with a somewhat complicated look in his eyes. "Here." Li Tianlan sneered. "I don't trust this place. Are all the people of the Wang family of Beihai dead? Why do you want to make things difficult for a woman?" She took the initiative to wait for you here. Summer Solstice shook her head. I didn't expect her to do this. You can imagine how disappointed she is in you. Li Tianlan's heart suddenly twitched. He said coldly, isn't she disappointed in you? Summer Solstice was silent for a long time. She looked at Wang Yuetong, who was in a coma, with gentle eyes and whispered, give her to me. If you want to go to the stage of formidable person, go ahead. Impossible. Li Tianlan said without hesitation. Although her injury has been stabilized by the eternal life technique, she really shouldn't move much. Tianlan, this is Yuetong's home after all. Where can you take her? The situation in Tiannan is chaotic. Emperor Dong's palace has just gained a firm foothold. But this is Mount Dibing after all. She's safer here than anywhere else. Lin Fengting said slowly, of course after she wakes up, if she still wants to go to you, I'll be responsible for sending her there. From now on, Beihai won't ask her to do anything. He looked at Li Tianlan. His voice was very soft but extremely tough. Such toughness was naturally directed at Summer Solstice. Summer Solstice glanced at Lin Fengting and said nothing, as if she acquiesced to this result. Li Tianlan did not speak. What? You don't trust me? Or you don't trust the Wang family of Beihai? If it's the latter, I'll live here during this period. You should be relieved, right? Lin Fengting said. Li Tianlan took a deep breath and loosened his grip on Wang Yuetong little by little. He looked down at Wang Yuetong. Wang Yuetong closed her eyes and breathed weakly. There was no trace of blood on her face. He suddenly felt a sharp pain in his heart. Summer Solstice took Wang Yuetong carefully. After what happened, I hope both of you can calm down and have a good talk. Lin Fengting said, Tianlan, Beihai is very sincere. They can give you the explanation you want. It's absolutely satisfactory. How about it? Li Tianlan glanced at Summer Solstice. Summer Solstice held Wang Yuetong and was silent for a long time. Then she said with difficulty, during this period I'll personally go to Zhongyuan province to visit Minister Dongqing. At this moment, there were corpses and blood everywhere on Mount Dibing. Li Tianlan was under the stage of formidable person, overlooking the entire Mount Dibing. He heard Summer Solstice's words. It seemed that he didn't want to delay Wang Yuetong's recuperation too much. After a moment of silence, he nodded expressionlessly. Summer Solstice smiled bitterly, feeling complicated. This moment was so humiliating for the entire Beihai. Li Tianlan was here. No matter what the result of the subsequent negotiations was for them, it was a real alliance under the city. End of this chapter. Bookmark for easy reading. Chapter 661. In the messy and hurried footsteps, Tang Shi and Song Ci, two young women who were likely to be the most influential in the Wang family of Beihai in the future, finally broke free from the crowd and rushed over. Wang Yuetong, who was in a coma, was so quiet that it was almost unreal. Even though her consciousness was immersed in the darkness, her eyebrows were still frowning. She looked a little haggard, helpless, and pitiful, which made people feel sorry for her. More and more people came over and looked at the scene with complicated expressions. How much despair and pain did Wang Yuetong have to feel in the vortex of the cage made of pure power for her to stab her heart without hesitation? Summer Solstice held Wang Yuetong in his arms. Li Tianlan held her hand. The killing intent and sword light that filled the sky had already disappeared, but the atmosphere in the field had become even more oppressive. Are you satisfied now? Song Ci's voice suddenly sounded in the silence. She stared at Li Tianlan, gritted her teeth and said word by word, in order to show your so-called majesty and declare your invincibility to the world, Yuetong almost died here. You destroyed Mount Dibing and your own woman. Are you satisfied with this result? Li Tianlan, your highness? Silence. Among the core members of the Wang family of Beihai who were gradually approaching, someone reached out and pulled Song Ci. Song Ci did not speak. She just looked at Li Tianlan with a cold smile. Li Tianlan finally raised his head slowly. He held Wang Yuetong's hand without any expression on his face. Do you want to die? He looked at Song Ci and asked in a cold voice. If you want to kill me, no one here can stop you. I don't want to die, but that doesn't mean I have to endure what I want to say. Song Ci sneered and looked into Li Tianlan's eyes. I want to ask you now, are you satisfied? Indeed, you don't have to hold it in, but that's all you can say. Li Tianlan nodded. What were you doing when Dijiang was defeated? What were you doing when Yuetong attacked? He pointed at the stage of formidable person in front of him. You are all hiding behind that rock and now you ask me if I am satisfied? I'm not satisfied. I'll only be satisfied when people like you are dead. Xianxia's face turned red. She wanted to say something but hesitated. There was very little shame in her eyes, only a touch of helplessness, not knowing whether it was sadness or joy. Come on. Lin Fengting said calmly, she's pregnant. Li Tianlong raised his eyebrows. Xianxia was stunned and looked at Lin Fengting. How did you know? Xianxia was pregnant when she was with Wang Xingxiao before the final maneuver of the two academies, but she didn't find out at that time. In the final maneuver she was also seriously injured by Li Tianlong. Since then her body had been a little weak and she had been recuperating recently. Otherwise, given her character, she would have stood in front of Li Tianlong even if she knew she would die. The problem was that only Wang Xingxiao, Summer Solstice and Wang Tianzong knew about it. How did Lin Fengting know? Lin Fengting didn't answer the question and just sighed softly. Xianxia's talent and strength were both extremely good, but because she was pregnant her injuries had yet to heal so she could not fight. Wang Xingxiao's real fiancé Tang Shi did not know martial arts. Wang Xingxiao was still in Eastern Europe. Dijiang was defeated by Li Tianlong. It was not that there were no other young talents in Beihai province, but Li Tianlong had fought all the way through Beihai. How many of them could stand here? In the end, Wang Yuetong was the only one standing in front of Li Tianlong. As for the older generation, Lin Fengting looked at the crowd around him and smiled with some mockery. He was very disappointed with such a Beihai, and he believed that Li Tianlong was the same. When Li Tianlong walked up Mount Dibbing, it was Dijiang who stood in front of him. Dijiang's surname was not Wang. When Li Tianlong was about to set foot on Xianyuan's stage, it was Wang Yuetong who stood in front of him. She was alone. On the stage of formidable person, there was a river of blood and countless corpses, but none of them belonged to the important figures of the Wang family of Beihai. Such a Beihai. In particular, Wang Yuetong's injury at this time would only make Li Tianlong more angry at such a Beihai. But Wang Yuetong's injury also made Li Tianlong really calm down. At least this was the result that Lin Fengting hoped to see. All right. Summer Solstice's voice suddenly sounded. I'll find a place to settle Yuetong. There are some things that we can talk about when I come back. Li Tianlong was expressionless and said nothing. Summer Solstice turned around and left without looking at Li Tianlong. The moment those soft and slender hands left Li Tianlong's, he subconsciously wanted to. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. He held tightly but finally let go. Wang Yuetong's palms were soft and delicate, but extremely cold. He watched Summer Solstice's back disappear into the night and wind and rain, remaining silent for a long time. You're sorry for her. You owe her. Xianxia said word by word. You're right. Li Tianlong said blandly, I owe her but Beihai also owes her. Xianxia seemed to want to say more. But Li Tianlong had lost all his patience. He raised his palms. The surrounding space suddenly trembled for a moment. A huge whirlpool spun rapidly, pushing Xianxia and all the people around her out. Li Tianlong quietly looked at the direction where Summer Solstice's figure disappeared and said nothing. Lin Fengting stood beside Li Tianlong and said nothing. Will she forgive me? Li Tianlong suddenly asked in a low voice. Lin Fengting sat down beside Li Tianlong. After a moment of silence he said softly, in fact you know that she didn't blame you at all. It depends on whether you can forgive yourself. Li Tianlong lowered his head and did not speak for a long time. He was thinking about Dongqing Rushi and Wang Yuetong. The two figures kept alternating in his mind. In silence, the muscles on his face kept trembling. I don't know if I did something wrong. His voice was a little hoarse. The sword light that pierced his chest was decisive and unyielding. The figure lying on the hospital bed was silent and pale. In the wind and rain, Li Tianlong sat on the ground, a little painful and a little lonely. I feel sorry for her. Lin Fengting sighed and patted Li Tianlong's shoulder without saying anything. Li Tianlong quietly looked at Mount Dibbing. From Qiushui to Xingzhou. From south to north. He fought through the entire Beihai province and the 7 sword-holding families. Mount Dibbing was already in ruins. Now the stage of formidable person was right in front of him and no one could stop him. But somehow Li Tianlong was a little dispirited and even depressed. I'm disappointed in such a Beihai. he said softly. After a pause he continued, "No, such a Beihai is good. But I'm disappointed in such a Wang family." In such a Beihai there was Dijiang who tried his best to stop him, the sword-holding families who did not change their original intentions, Tangshi and Xianxia, Wang Yuetong, Huangfu Qiushui, Summer Solstice, and countless people who were willing to die for the stage of formidable person. Countless of them were guarding this holy land. But the core figures of the Wang family of Beihai who should guard here the most didn't even speak since he came here, let alone say anything. He was extremely disappointed with such silence. Big trees have dead branches. Lin Fengting was silent for a while. He thought of everything Li Tianlan saw along the way on Mount Dibing. Among the core figures of the Wang family of Beihai, there were people who dared to stand up. But when countless people wanted to stand up, there were also many people who pulled them forward. That was an extremely subtle entanglement. Some people wanted to enter. Some people wanted to retreat. Some people wanted to be heroes. Some people were cowards. After all, this was no longer the Wang family of Beihai that was now recorded in the history of Zhongzhou state. I'm also disappointed in such a Wang family. Lin Fengting chuckled. I think Tianzong will be even more disappointed. He can't absolve himself from the blame for the Wang family's current situation. What's there to be disappointed about? Li Tianlan said coldly. These are related to him but not the main ones. Lin Fengting said calmly. Any force will encounter such problems, and in the face of such problems the Wang family of Beihai is extremely experienced. Let's wait and see. When Tianzong gets his injury under control, it's time for the Wang family of Beihai to start. Start what? Wang Tianzong asked. Start reshuffling. Lin Fengting said blandly. Such things have happened many times in the history of the Wang family of Beihai. They either rise from the ashes or begin to decline. Li Tianlan thought quietly for more than 10 minutes before saying, Yuetong shouldn't stay in Beihai. I'll take her away. She wants to, I have no problem with that. Summer Solstice's voice sounded not far away. The vortex of power around Li Tianlan and Lin Fengting was still spinning. Summer Solstice's expression was a little. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. Haggard and pale. She stretched out her hand and waved. She walked in from outside the vortex quietly. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and didn't say anything. If she wants to go to Tianan, I won't stop her. Summer Solstice looked at Li Tianlan and was silent for a while. Then she said, Now we should have a good talk. Li Tianlan looked at Summer Solstice and twitched the corner of his mouth. The messy wind and rain were still going on. All the core members of the Wang family of Beihai were isolated outside the vortex of power. In the blurry scene, people could only see Summer Solstice talking to Li Tianlan seriously. Different people had different moods. Some people felt humiliated. Some people felt lucky. That was the Wang family today. The night was getting darker. Darkness. The wind and rain were still going on. After talking all night, Li Tianlan slowly stood up. The vortex that lasted all night disappeared. In the messy wind and rain, Li Tianlan looked at Summer Solstice and the stage of formidable person in Beihai. He said blandly, It's over. No one knew what Summer Solstice and Li Tianlan talked about that night. But the young Dong Huang finally chose to stop in front of the stage of formidable person. The blood on the stage of formidable person was washed by the rain and flowed on Mount Dibing. Under the wind and rain, the stone of formidable person, carved with countless glories and pasts, stood there quietly, gazing at everything. Li Tianlan slowly turned around and walked back. His figure was getting fainter and fainter. Summer Solstice stood quietly and watched Li Tianlan's figure getting farther and farther away. A faintly discernible aura appeared on Mount Dibing without any warning. The crazy wind and rain seemed to be much smaller in an instant. Li Tianlan's figure paused. Lin Fengting and Summer Solstice looked at the side of the stage of formidable person almost at the same time. That was the place where the wounded were temporarily placed on Mount Dibing. And that position. It was the position of Dijiang. Countless air vibrated slightly in the air. With a powerful force, it gathered crazily toward Dijiang in an instant. Lin Fengting raised his eyebrows and said nothing. Summer Solstice was a little surprised and a little regretful. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and watched this scene quietly. Countless surging forces stirred the air and finally turned into an extremely condensed domain. It broke through. When everything was completely over, Dijiang, who was defeated by Li Tianlan, officially stepped into the invincible realm in absolute humiliation. After the disappearance of Sword Emperor, he was the second new invincible realm expert of the Wang family of Beihai. Li Tianlan smiled. He didn't take advantage of Dijiang's serious injury to kill this threat. He just glanced at it casually and said calmly, "When your injury is healed, come to Tianan to find me. I will give you a chance to challenge me." Confident, strong, invincible and condescending, his figure stepped into the sky and never looked back. The glimmer of the morning sun reflected his figure that was getting higher and higher. At this moment, everyone on Mount Dibing was looking up at the chosen one who had completely risen. Li Tianlan's figure moved forward. He waved his palm in the air. In an instant, an incomparably bright light bloomed from his hand. That light was so cold, so bright and so dazzling. The shining silver light swallowed the morning sun, shone on Mount Dibing, the stage of formidable person and the surging North Sea. It was as cold as the moon but with endless sharpness. Summer Solstice's palm moved but she finally chose to be silent. People looked at Li Tianlan who was getting higher and higher, and at the silver light that was falling gradually. The moon-like sharpness crossed North Sea, crossed the steps of the stage of formidable person, and finally fell on the top of the stone of formidable person with incomparable sharpness. The metal pierced into the rock. With a slight sound, the silver long sword was directly inserted above the stone of formidable person, trembling in the morning sun. Li Tianlan's figure had disappeared in the air. But the long sword shining with a cold luster was still facing the wind and rain, looking down at Mount Dibing. The 13th floor. The silver moon sword. From the moment Li Tianlan officially stepped into North Sea, everything seemed to have been predestined. Tianguang's soul lock platform. The silver moon fell into North Sea. End of this chapter. Bookmark for easy reading. Chapter 662. Until Li Tianlan left for a long time, no one under the stage of formidable person said a word. Too many things happened on Mount Dibing that day. Mount Dibing was reduced to ruins. Dijiang suffered a crushing defeat, but he broke through to the invincible realm. Wang Yuetong broke with Li Tianlan. Blood flowed like a river on the stage of formidable person. The silver moon fell on North Sea. The light of dawn grew brighter and brighter. The wind and rain never stopped over Xingzhou. The crazy rain covered the entire Beihai province, as if it was constantly destroying the backbone of Beihai province. Summer Solstice raised her head and looked at the direction where Li Tianlan disappeared. She was silent for a long time. The sword light had disappeared. Mount Dibing ushered in the day. Li Tianlan had really left. Everything was completely over. Summer Solstice took a deep breath, feeling a little tired. "Clean up." She paused, looked at the large ruins around her and said in a low voice, "Try to restore Mount Dibing to its original state as soon as possible." Light footsteps sounded behind Summer Solstice. Wang Qinglei walked over slowly with no expression on his face. Everyone noticed this scene. The tense atmosphere of the Wang family of Beihai had disappeared, but an extremely subtle atmosphere was constantly spreading. Wang Qinglei's figure separated the crowd and came to Summer Solstice. Summer Solstice looked at him, her eyes calm. When has the Wang family of Beihai ever been so aggrieved? Wang Qinglei looked at Summer Solstice with no expression on his face and his voice was cold. "Denounce me." Everyone's heart shook violently. The wind and rain filled the world. At this moment, there seemed to be a clear tearing sound coming from inside the Wang family of Beihai. The cracks that had always been hidden under the undercurrent seemed to instantly expand and become extremely ferocious and obvious. "That's right." Another voice sounded abruptly. "The Wang family of Beihai has never been humiliated like this for hundreds of years." A middle-aged man with a somewhat gloomy expression stood out and stood behind Wang Qinglei. He was the patriarch of a branch of the Wang family of Beihai. He was very close to Wang Qinglei and could be said to be Wang Qinglei's real confidant. In the vast Beihai province, Wang Qinglei didn't have much influence among the 7 sword-holding families, but he had many supporters among the many branches of the Wang family of Beihai, and the one in front of him was one of them. When Li Tianlan was killing on the stage of formidable person, he had been standing at the back of the crowd. Now that Li Tianlan had left, he finally remembered his mission and remembered that this was Mount Dibing, the holy land that the Wang family of Beihai had guarded for hundreds of years. The silver moon sword was stabbed into the top of the stone of formidable person, gently trembling in the wind and rain. The middle-aged man with a gloomy face suddenly pointed in that direction. For hundreds of years, no one has dared to stick a weapon on the stone of formidable person so arrogantly. Who does Li Tianlong think he is? Does he deserve it? Without any hesitation, his figure suddenly soared into the sky, heading straight for the stone of formidable person. Countless thunderbolts circled around his body. At this moment he looked incomparably brave. If none of you dare to move, I'll do it. He felt that his voice and posture were heroic. At this moment he felt that he was the hero of the Wang family of Beihai. He stretched out his hand, wanting to pull out the silver moon that had brought endless humiliation to the Wang family of Beihai. Wang Qinglei frowned. Summer Solstice said nothing, but there was some mockery in her eyes. Everyone was watching this scene. The bright thunderbolt completely wrapped the middle-aged man's body. He stretched out his hand and fell on the hilt of the silver moon. Li Tianlong had already left. The hilt of the silver moon suddenly trembled. In an instant, the bright and cold sword light covered the stage of formidable person. It flashed for a moment. The thunderbolt disappeared. The middle-aged man who felt that he was very brave also disappeared. The blood mist fell all over the sky, and then was washed away by the wind and rain. The corner of Lin Fingting's mouth moved, but he didn't say anything. He probably called him an idiot in his heart. Shenyuan Feng was a truly conscious magic weapon. Although he was not a human being, he could already be regarded as a life. The silver moon was a part of Shenyuan Feng. Tonight, the silver moon absorbed the energy of the devil troop, and its spirituality was almost at its peak. At this moment, the silver moon did not have Li Tianlong's sword intent. It was completely the sword intent of the sword. If one wanted to pull out the sword, one had to have the strength. There was a dead silence under the stage of formidable person. Everyone was looking at the silver moon on the stone of formidable person, and their hearts were extremely cold. Summer Solstice turned to look at Wang Qinglei and said calmly, "It's only temporary." The aggressive Wang Qinglei seemed to be stunned by the scene of the silver moon sword. He raised his finger and was silent for a long time, but he didn't say anything in the end. The field of power in the air that covered a radius of dozens of meters was completely silent. Wang Qinglei hesitated for a moment and then walked toward Dijiang. Dijiang was lying in a half-collapsed palace, covered in blood and quietly looking at the roof. He broke through to the invincible realm when he was seriously injured. After the breakthrough, his injuries didn't get better. Instead, because of the sudden increase in strength during the breakthrough, his injuries became more serious. He lay there motionless like a statue. He didn't even react when Wang Qinglei and Summer Solstice came in. At this moment no one knew what he was thinking. But it was something that many people wanted to know. Wang Qinglei walked to Dijiang and squinted at him. After a long time he asked, "What did Li Tianlong say to you in the end?" Many people were paying attention to Dijiang's next answer. Only Summer Solstice turned her head and looked into the distance through the half-collapsed palace. In the light of dawn, there seemed to be a delicate water drop falling through the wind and rain. Summer Solstice looked at it quietly for a long time. Finally, Dijiang's voice sounded. "He told the truth. He didn't say anything." Wang Qinglei squinted and smiled. He didn't believe Dijiang. Not at all. At that moment, countless people looked at Dijiang with cold eyes. Xianxia finally let out a long sigh of relief after she carefully treated the wound and saw that the bleeding had completely stopped. Wang Yuetong's breath had calmed down, but her face was still extremely pale and haggard. Xianxia felt sorry for her and tidied her hair. Looking at her face, she couldn't say anything for a while. "How is she?" Tangshi asked, standing aside. "She's fine now." Xianxia thought for a moment and said, "Yuetong was seriously injured, but now she should be fine." Wang Yuetong's sword that pierced into her heart was grabbed by Li Tianlong. Although it was shifted by an inch, the sword energy that entered her body also caused fatal injuries to her body. But Summer Solstice still had half of immortality, which was enough to stabilize Wang Yuetong's condition in the shortest time. If there are no accidents, she should wake up in a few days. Xianxia said. Tangshi was in a trance. Compared with Xianxia, who didn't appear in front of people for a long time, Wang Yuetong actually had a better relationship with Tangshi. Because of this, thinking of the sword that Wang Yuetong resolutely pierced into her chest, Xianxia felt more uncomfortable. She felt uncomfortable. They were now in the most remote corner of Mount Dipping. Few people came here on weekdays, but there was also a decorative palace here. It was very small, but now it had become one of the few well-preserved enemies in Mount Dipping. Sitting here, far away from the stage of formidable person, everything outside the room seemed to have nothing to do with them. Xianxia sat down next to Wang Yuetong and carefully held her cold palm. After a long time she whispered, "What will she do in the future?" She would wake up eventually. But what would happen after she woke up? Would she stay here, suffer lovesickness and loneliness, become enemies with Li Tianlan, and finally turn all the love into hatred? Or would she let go of everything today and return to Li Tianlan? Xianxia also fell silent. She didn't know how to answer this question. It was impossible for Wang Yuetong to let go of Beihai and Li Tianlan. For Wang Yuetong it might be easier not to wake up than to wake up, right? After all, she still loves the wrong person. Xianxia whispered. There is no right or wrong. Xianxia shook her head. Since she has fallen in love, it is right. If there is anything wrong, it is the past grievances that are wrong. Xianxia still wanted to say something, but she suddenly turned her head. Her body tightened and her face became extremely dignified in an instant. An extremely soft and gentle force seemed to approach the palace, which was barely intact and shrouded the whole palace. In Xianxia's sight, a very delicate water droplet went through the window. It was so delicate and perfect, looking for something with a little confused consciousness. Finally, it found its target and slowly fell on Wang Yuetong's chest. Xianxia looked at it quietly and didn't speak for a long time. The little thing that looked like a water droplet was extremely delicate. It was stuck to Wang Yuetong's chest like a beautiful pendant. What is it? Xianxia stretched out her hand in surprise as if she wanted to touch it. It's so beautiful. Don't move. Xianxia held Xianxia's hand. She was Wang Xingxiao's woman, and Xianxia was also Wang Xingxiao's woman. The two could be said to be rivals in love, but their relationship was not bad. Of course it was not good either. Strictly speaking, they were not very familiar with each other. But no matter what, she could not watch Xianxia be swallowed by danger. Xianxia didn't know martial arts, so she thought this little thing was beautiful. But in Xianxia's perception, this little thing that was as delicate as a water droplet had the power to destroy the whole palace in an instant. Under that delicate appearance, she felt all the sword intent that was restrained to the extreme. This is a sword. Xianxia whispered, the sword in the 13th floor. The 13th floor. The heartbreaking sword. Xianxia didn't know the name of this sword, but now it didn't matter at all. This was Li Tianlan's love for Wang Yuetong. Xianxia looked at Wang Yuetong's face and laughed at herself. Li Tianlan was really good to Wang Yuetong. But this heartbreaking sword had already explained Li Tianlan's attitude. Li Tianlan did not show mercy to the Wang family of Beihai. His only concession might be that he didn't destroy the stage of formidable person. But the silver moon fell into Beihai, and the sharp sword edge had been inserted into the stone of formidable person. Xianxia paid more attention to the negotiation between Summer Solstice and Li Tianlan. How much did the Wang family of Beihai have to pay to calm Li Tianlan's anger for everything that happened today? And what did Wang Yuetong get? She looked at her pale face and sighed softly. I still love the wrong person. Chapter 663. When everything was really calm, Summer Solstice came to the ruins of a palace that had completely collapsed according to her memory. This palace was also in the corner of Mount Dipping, a place that was not usually noticed. Summer Solstice stood beside the ruins and was silent for a while, then gently waved her hand. Her gentle movement brought a gust of wind. The powerful wind blew the ruins up with a rhythm. On the dusty floor she found a switch and pressed it. The ground was shaking slightly. The cracked floor was separated to both sides, and the cracks on the ground were shattered, looking more and more ferocious. A deep passage appeared in front of Summer Solstice. The light at the front of the passage had been extinguished, and the alloy walls on both sides were slightly distorted. Therefore, when the passage opened, the sound was extremely harsh. Summer Solstice looked calm and walked along the passage. At the end of the passage was not a secret research room with a high-tech atmosphere, but a rather luxurious and comfortable space. When Summer Solstice came in, 4 or 5 middle-aged men and women in white research uniforms were sitting on the sofa, talking about something with a dignified face. Seeing Summer Solstice coming in, They stood up at the same time and said respectfully, "Madam." "What are you talking about?" Summer Solstice chuckled and took the initiative to ask. "There are some small problems in the research process. We are discussing whether there is a better solution." The oldest middle-aged man had white hair on his temples. As he spoke, he picked up a notebook from his pocket and quickly jotted something down. Then he smiled and said, "So far it seems that the results of the discussion are not bad." The ground of Mount Dibbing had long been a mess with blood flowing like a river. But separated by the thick alloy walls, the ground and the underground were two completely different worlds. Just like many people rarely cared about what the real underground core places of the Wang family of Beihai were doing, they just chose to pay attention to the results. These people in the Underground Research Institute also rarely paid attention to what was happening on the ground. At this moment, these people in front of them didn't even know what was happening on the ground. Summer Solstice didn't say much. She just nodded and said casually, "Where is Naylin?" "The doctor has just made a new discovery and is making a record," the oldest middle-aged man replied. When it came to the doctor, his respectful attitude was far better than when he was facing Summer Solstice. Summer Solstice nodded and said, "Go ahead." Then she walked to one of the rooms. The middle-aged men and women looked at each other for a moment. They wanted to say something but hesitated. In the end, they didn't stop him. In the center of the resting area, there was a room that stood out from the masses. The room was located in the center, and the silver door frame could be said to be the most eye-catching color in the resting area. Xiaxia stopped in front of the silver door and knocked on it. The room was silent for a moment before a pleasant voice rang out, "Come in." Summer Solstice pushed the door open. The room was filled with silvery light that shone on her body. Her body seemed to be somewhat transparent. This was an incomparably pure room. The walls, the table, the chairs, the bed, and the bedsheets were all silver. The exquisite room was not big. A very young woman was sitting in front of a small desk. She wore a pair of silver glasses and was typing seriously on the keyboard. When Xiaxia walked in, she didn't even raise her head. She just said lightly, "What's the matter?" Focused men are very attractive. Focused women are more attractive. The woman had delicate and neat short hair and a jade-like face. She sat quietly in front of the computer in a meticulous posture. The whole person looked as beautiful as a painting. Her delicate face was extremely focused and almost serious. This seriousness turned into a kind of coldness that kept people thousands of miles away, like an iceberg in a room full of silver light. The light blended together and was extremely cold and sharp. "I heard that you have a new discovery?" Summer Solstice closed the door, stood in the room full of silver light, and laughed. The sound of typing on the keyboard suddenly stopped. The woman behind the screen finally raised her head and saw Summer Solstice. She seemed to be stunned for a while, then stood up and called her auntie in a flat voice. He was not warm, not cold. The silver glasses were taken off by her. She looked at Summer Solstice and didn't ask her to sit down. She just said quietly, "Auntie, what's the matter?" Without the cover of her eyes suddenly became extremely charming. They were different from the black pupils of ordinary people. There was a trace of incomparably deep and enchanting silver in her eyes. Resplendent, silent, enchanting, yet incomparably arrogant. The Wang family of Beihai had an indomitable sword emperor, who supported everything of the Wang family of Beihai like a sea-stabilizing needle. Under the huge figure of Wang Tianzong, there were also many soul figures in the Wang family of Beihai. Some were well known. Some were unknown. Some of them rarely appeared, but their names had already spread far and wide. The young woman in front of him happened to belong to the third category. She rarely left Mount Dibbing and had never left Beihai. But in Zhongzhou State and the Dark World, almost everyone who paid attention to the Wang family of Beihai knew that there was such a code name. Silver Eyes. She had a double doctorate in human biology and genetics, and was the main person in charge of the biological laboratory of the Wang family of Beihai. Perhaps such an identity was not enough to attract everyone's attention. But in recent years, there had been clear evidence that the woman with the code name Silver Eyes had devoted herself to research that had always attracted worldwide attention. This was the core project of the Wang family of Beihai. The development of the third generation of immortality potion was currently in charge of the woman in front of him. She was Naylin Shuying, the genius of this generation of the Naylin family of Beihai. The Naylin family was not one of the 7 major sword-holding families in Beihai. But in the past 200 years, the patriarch of the Nalan family of every generation, had a name recognized by countless people. The first famous doctor in Zhou state. This was a real famous doctor family, or even a real Dr. King family. Summer Solstice looked at Nalan Shireen quietly. Her eyes were a little distressed. It was not pity, but pity and some regret. She took the initiative to sit down on a chair next to her. She looked at the other party's silver and proud eyes and didn't speak for a long time. Nalan Shireen put down her work and silently poured a glass of water for Summer Solstice. Up there, Summer Solstice pointed up and whispered, "Something happened just now, but it's over now." "Li Tianlan?" Nalan Shireen asked. Summer Solstice was a little surprised. "How do you know?" "I talked to my father on the phone a few days ago. He said that Beihai has not been peaceful recently." Nalan Shireen said indifferently. "As it's not just peaceful. From the south to the north, he really penetrated the whole Beihai." Summer Solstice held the glass of water and was silent for a long time. Then she laughed at herself. A strange emotion flashed through Nalan Shireen's silver eyes. She grew up in Beihai, so she naturally knew how powerful the Wang family of Beihai in Beihai province was. After hundreds of years of development, the Wang family of Beihai today was a family that was infinitely close to perfection. The so-called perfection meant that there was no weakness. The Wang family of Beihai had almost no weakness. Force, foundation, power, wealth and talent reserve. The Wang family of Beihai had everything. In such a Wang family of Beihai, in such a Beihai province, could someone really sweep all the way and directly step into Mount Dibing? Nalan Shireen had no concept of this form of strength. She didn't understand martial arts, so she naturally didn't know what the so-called invincibility was. She only cared about one result. "Did we lose?" Summer Solstice was silent for a long time. Although it was a little embarrassing, there were some things that she still had to tell the truth. "We lost." Nalan Shireen's fingers trembled slightly. Her eyes were still calm, and the subtle emotional fluctuations just now had completely calmed down. She lowered her head slightly and asked, "Dijiang also lost?" "Dijiang entered the invincible realm," Summer Solstice said softly. Nalan Shireen didn't speak and was lost in thought. "It's very chaotic up there now. A lot of things have to be dealt with, and it can't be done in a short time." Summer Solstice took a deep breath, looked at Nalan Shireen and suddenly smiled. "Nalan, have you ever thought about leaving Beihai for a while?" Nalan Shireen didn't seem to hear the question. She shook her head. "We may have lost, but Li Tianlan didn't win either. Everyone knows that the real valuable core places of Mount Dibing are some research institutes located underground. Even if he wins the battle on the ground, how many people can he kill? As long as those research institutes are not destroyed, the foundation of the Wang family of Beihai will not be shaken." She paused and said lightly, "At most, it will be a little embarrassing. This can also prove that Li Tianlan is very sober." Summer Solstice said, "It's not that he doesn't want to touch our research institutes, but he can't. We won't let him touch them, neither will Zhou state. He also knows this very well. But it doesn't mean that he doesn't see it." Nalan Shireen didn't speak. She didn't understand these things, so she didn't bother to ask. She wanted to ask how Dijiang was, but she swallowed the words when they were on the tip of her tongue. "Why are you telling me this?" After a long period of silence, she asked faintly. "Do you want to leave Beihai?" "Well, for a while." Summer Solstice repeated the question just now. Nalan Shireen didn't speak. She looked at Summer Solstice with a puzzled expression. There was a blank emotion in her silver eyes. "Where to go, to Tiannan or Yuzhou?" Summer Solstice deliberated and was a little uncertain. "We need you to do your best to cure a wounded person. I'll tell the lab in your home and I'll assign you the most professional assistants." Nalan Shireen understood. "Is this Li Tianlan's condition?" she asked softly. Summer Solstice agreed to his condition, which meant the compromise of the Wang family of Beihai. How many years had the Wang family of Beihai never given in the dark world? Had it already reached this step? Summer Solstice finally smiled bitterly without hiding it. In an angle that Nalan Shireen couldn't see, she clenched her fists tightly. Li Tianlan's condition? Could be said that, but it was more than that. The Wang family of Beihai had to ensure that Dongqing Rushi recovered, so Nalan Shireen leaving Mount Dibing was just the first step. Wang Yuetong's sword finally stopped Li Tianlan from stepping on the stage, a formidable person. But it couldn't stop the silver moon from falling into Beihai. and it couldn't stop her from negotiating with Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan was so generous, but what the Wang family of Beihai had to pay was more than just nail insuring. She thought about the series of conditions and her arms were trembling slightly. More than 20 years ago she united with Kunlun City to set off the Li family's treason case, which was equivalent to ending the glory of the Li family with her own hands. And today, more than 20 years later, the series of conditions, were they conditions? She shook her head. No. She whispered in a complicated tone, this is the rise of the Li family. Chapter 664. Dongqing Wudi didn't sleep all night. That night, countless people in Zhongzhou State and even the entire dark world waited silently for dawn. The mighty vanguard was still gathering toward the floating island and Kanglin in the light of dawn. In the pavilion on the hillside, Dongqing Wudi gently patted the ancient railing and looked at the still rushing Kanglin River. He was as solemn as a statue. Bai Qingzhao sat on the stone bench behind him and put the teapot that he had been playing with all night on the table. He looked a little restless. No news from Tianlan? Dongqing Wudi shook his head slowly and said lightly, no news is good news. Bai Qingzhao was silent for a while and did not speak. He climbed Mount Dibbing alone. Li Tianlan let the whole dark world see his courage. But it also meant that he had to face countless dangers. Although Dongqing Wudi mobilized a large number of troops and fundamentally suppressed the most powerful Beihai core of the Wang family of Beihai, neither of them was sure whether there was any backup plan on Mount Dibbing. It had been a night since Li Tianlan stepped into Mount Dibbing. But they still did not receive any news about Mount Dibbing. There shouldn't be any problem. Dongqing Wudi suddenly said. With Tianlan's current strength, there can be no accident if he defeats Dijiang on Mount Dibbing. Now the Wang family of Beihai has internal and external troubles. It is impossible for Summer Solstice to take action in person. If she doesn't take action, Mount Dibbing will not have the power to balance Tianlan. Bai Qingzhao's fingers unconsciously rubbed the teapot in front of him. After a long time he said, is it possible for Wang Tianzong to take action by force? This had always been his biggest concern and the focus of everyone in the Dark World. The eternal sword in Eastern Europe could be said to be the strongest sword in hundreds of years. People could be sure that Wang Tianzong was seriously injured in that sword, but no one could be sure how serious Wang Tianzong's injury was. If they were not sure, no one dared to act rashly. Li Tianlan's approach gave everyone a chance to observe the Wang family of Beihai. Tianguang's spirit lock platform. All the way. The entire Beihai province was constantly in turmoil. Wang Tianzong never showed up. This made the whole dark world realize something, but they could not be sure or they could not believe it. Until today. Li Tianlan, who had defeated the entire Beihai province, set foot on Mount Dibbing. Would Wang Tianzong show up? If he appeared based on the realm he showed in Eastern Europe, even if he could barely make a sword move, Li Tianlan would not be able to block it. Impossible. Dongqing Wudi smiled and replied in a light but affirmative voice. He's lucky to be alive now. Maybe he's already dead. It's impossible for him to take action by force. Bai Qingzhao turned his head in the direction of Xingzhou and did not speak for a long time. Don't worry. Dongqing Wudi sat opposite him and poured himself a cup of cold tea that had long been cold. Although there is no news yet, it should be soon. Don't you think it's strange? Bai Qingzhao suddenly asked. What do you mean? Dongqing Wudi glanced at him. The Wang family of Beihai is too quiet. Even without Wang Tianzong, the comprehensive strength of the Wang family of Beihai is still extremely strong. But this time their performance is too quiet, so quiet that it can even be said to be a little weak. Tianlan defeated the entire Beihai province. Mount Dibbing is facing the enemy so passively, and Dijiang is asking to be humiliated. Do they really have no means to threaten Li Tianlan? Even if they don't have force, the Wang family of Beihai has never been weak in science and technology. Well, even if we don't talk about it, since Tianlan stepped into Beihai, has there been any movement in Zhongzhou State? No. Not at all. The Southeast group has been silent all this time. This is too abnormal. Bai Qingzhao's voice was calm and doubtful. Don't you understand? Dongqing Wudi laughed. Because Beihai is a part of Zhongzhou State. He said slowly, Zhongzhou State is a country, a camp, and there are rules in the same camp. Tianlan came to Beihai this time to ask for an explanation. He stepped on the Wang family's face, but he never did anything. What Zhongzhou State can't accept is to abide by the rules. Even if the Wang family of Beihai really has the means to kill Tianlong, they can't use it. If they use it, they don't abide by the rules. Within the rules, as long as Tianlong has the strength, he can sweep everything. What can the Wang family of Beihai do to him? It's not like that. Bai Qingzhao shook his head solemnly. Even if the Wang family of Beihai doesn't touch Tianlong, can't the Southeast group make a fuss in other places? The Wang family of Beihai was the strongest force in the Dark World. In Zhongzhou State, the Southeast group led by the Wang family of Beihai was also one of the strongest groups in Zhongzhou State. Its influence was obviously stronger than that of the giant group and even the academics. The unusual silence of the Southeast group was what made him most uneasy. It's still the same sentence. Dongqing Wudi said slowly, Beihai is a part of Zhongzhou State. Am I right to say that? Dongqing Wudi asked. Of course. Bai Qingzhao said without hesitation. It's true. For hundreds of years, this sentence has been said in Beihai and Zhongzhou State. Dongqing Wudi's smile was a little cold. It's a fact. But who will really think that such a fact is a fact? In history, many decisions of the Wang family of Beihai have more or less affected the direction of the general trend of Zhongzhou State. Of course, such an influence is often benign. But generation after generation of ruling groups and rulers, they will not think that benign is good. Dongqing Wudi waved his hand. No one will deny the contribution and importance of the Wang family of Beihai to Zhongzhou State. But Beihai is just a province and the Wang family is just a family. A family, but it affects the general trend of the whole Zhongzhou State. No matter how good such an influence is, what's the point in the eyes of those in power? It's meaningless. They will only think that it's abnormal. Whether it's good or bad, such a result is indeed abnormal. Beihai is a part of Zhongzhou State, and Beihai province belongs to Zhongzhou State. Ha, ha ha. For hundreds of years, every generation of rulers will think about a problem at some time. Do you know what it is? In Dongqing Wudi's light voice, Bai Qingzhao clearly perceived a huge, almost majestic pressure. He subconsciously sat up straight and shook his head. The problem they think about is surprisingly consistent. When the Wang family of Beihai influenced Zhongzhou State countless times, every ruler will think that Beihai province belongs to Zhongzhou State. But because of the existence of the Wang family, what is the actual situation? Does the Wang family of Beihai belong to Zhongzhou State, or does Zhongzhou State actually belong to the Wang family of Beihai? His clear and faint voice was like a thunder, rolling over Bai Qingzhao's head in an instant. Bai Qingzhao's face changed. In the cool morning light of Beihai, the wind of the Kanglin River blew across both sides. But his forehead was instantly covered with a layer of cold sweat. After all, Beihai belonged to Zhongzhou State. Or had Zhongzhou State always belonged to the Wang family of Beihai? This could be said to be the most sensitive question. Dongqing Rushi waved her hand. The answer is not important. The important thing is that I have just said that it's abnormal. The Southeast group is not deliberately silent, but it has to be silent. Because they are also in power, they may not think it's abnormal. But there are 6 groups in Zhongzhou State. The will of the Southeast group is very important, but the will of the other 5 groups is equally important. If they think it's abnormal, then it's abnormal. Dongqing Wudi said calmly. Bai Qingzhao's tone was a little dry. The president talked to me about this topic. Dongqing Wudi was silent for a while, then slowly said, since it's abnormal, we have to correct it. Bai Qingzhao's breathing was a little uneven. How to correct it? Beihai province belongs to Zhongzhou State. This is the truth, and the truth should become the real truth. Dongqing Wudi said, don't you understand? At least for now, the Wang family of Beihai has temporarily lacked the power to sweep everything. Therefore, the current Beihai and the Southeast group are not facing the pressure brought by the alliance of the giant group and the academics. They are facing the pressure from the tacit alliance of the 5 groups in Zhongzhou State. They must remain silent. Bai Qingzhao was silent for a long time. No wonder. Although everything Li Tianlong did in Beihai did not touch the bottom line, it was not without impropriety. But Zhongzhou State was always silent. So that was it. Zhongzhou State completely wanted to use Li Tianlong to expose the weakness of the Wang family of Beihai to everyone. When everyone noticed the weakness of Beihai and was ready to take action, Zhongzhou State would attack strongly and sweep everything away. Beihai must realize the benefits of being close to Zhongzhou State. and they must also be aware of their own position. They were just a province of Zhongzhou State, not the master of Zhongzhou State. Let's be clear. Zhongzhou State's move was completely to quietly weaken the autonomy of the Wang family of Beihai and Beihai Province. You already have the clearest goal? Bai Qingzhao smiled bitterly. He was sure that such a plan was only brewing in the minds of a limited number of people, and it might even only be brewing in the minds of a few council members of Zhongzhou State. Many members might not be qualified to know. Bai Qingzhao knew that he did not have enough authority, but he could not help but ask. At present, the clearest goal is to nationalize the number 03 base in Beihai. Dongqing Wudi said slowly. Bai Qingzhao's expression suddenly changed and he even stood up directly. In the silence that lasted for countless years and generations, Zhongzhou State finally showed its long-hidden fangs in the most suitable opportunity. To the Wang family of Beihai. Zhongzhou State's move was not necessarily a stab to the Wang family of Beihai, but this series of actions was undoubtedly putting a rope around the Wang family of Beihai. Number 03 base in Beihai. This was a base that had only been reported in legends, and few people knew the exact location of this base. This was the nuclear experimental base of the Wang family of Beihai. At present, all the nuclear power stations, even military equipment and even nuclear weapons of the Wang family of Beihai were closely related to the number 03 base. There were too many possibilities for what it meant to completely incorporate the number 03 base into the system of Zhongzhou State. Are you sure? Bai Qingzhao slowly sat down and subconsciously lowered his voice. This is the best chance. Dongqing Wudi said calmly, we have to try. If things really reach the point of no return, then. Bai Qingzhao trembled subconsciously and his face was a little pale. There is no such if. Dongqing Wudi smiled and said, we are not fools. We won't act recklessly. The phone suddenly rang. Dongqing Wudi took the phone and glanced at the number. He raised his eyebrows slightly, and his tense spirit seemed to relax in an instant. It's a call from Tianlong. He said cheerfully and picked up the call. Minister, I will go ashore in Longjiang by boat and go to Sai City by the way. Li Tianlong's low voice sounded. Dongqing Wudi froze for a moment and said subconsciously, things are not going well? After a long silence, Li Tianlong took a deep breath and said blankly, I don't know. He didn't know if things were going well. He fought through Beihai and climbed Mount Dibing. Now he didn't want to think about these things. Summer solstice promised me a lot of things. We'll talk about it in detail when we meet. He said slowly. Dongqing Wudi's face relaxed and he nodded. He knew the result of Li Tianlong's trip, so he naturally knew what he should do. What do you want from Zhongzhou State? I can operate it. He took the initiative to speak. Li Tianlong smiled. His voice seemed a little tired but it was extremely stable. No need. He said, I don't have any requirements for Zhongzhou State. Dongqing Wudi was silent for a long time before he laughed and looked extremely happy. He nodded approvingly. This is the most correct thing to do. Can you tell me what you think? Nothing. Li Tianlong said quietly, I just think I should tell some people that I belong to Zhongzhou State, not the other way around.